He bet the city girl wouldn't survive his farm. She proved him wrong and stole his heart. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Walter Cooper woke before dawn, as he did every day. The ranch's horizon was only a faint blue line beneath the lingering darkness. He found a peculiar kind of comfort in this moment, when night and day blurred and life felt full of potential. Standing in his thick wool robe, coffee mug in hand, he inhaled the crisp air. The barn loomed in the distance, the scent of hay drifting on the breeze. He smiled to himself, imagining the day's work waiting for him. At 40 years old, Walter had wrestled success from the ground up. Raised in a small Midwest town, he'd spent his early life toiling for pennies on rented acreage. Now, he owned thousands of acres of prime farmland. Proud that each field was a testament to his iron will. The locals called him the Millionaire Rancher, a moniker that made him grin, though he'd never truly gotten used to the attention. He preferred solitude, the hum of nature, and the straightforward honesty of hard labor. His morning routine was a sacred ritual, checking the fields, greeting the horses, and conversing with his ranch hands. After finishing his coffee, he dressed in worn jeans, pulled on his boot, and made his way outside. The hush of dawn enveloped him. Gravel crunched underfoot. An old windmill squeaked in the distance. This was the life he loved, free, grounded, unmistakably real. Inside the stable, he found one of his longtime employees, Gary, tending to a bay mare. Grey-haired and wiry, Gary lifted his hat in greeting. "Morning, boss," Gary said, a playful tone in his voice. "Ready for another day of conquering the world?" Walter gave a low chuckle. "More like ready for another day of digging in dirt. Sounds about right, though." He gently ran a hand along the mare's neck, murmuring a soft greeting. The scent of oats and horsehair reminded him of simpler times. Gary cleared his throat. "By the way, the guys were talking at the feed store yesterday. Something about you hosting a little get-together this weekend." Walter shrugged, stepping back from the mare. "A few old friends are coming by, nothing fancy." Gary smirked. "Fancy for you is probably a barbecue and a handful of folks, but folks in town keep saying you have a surprise for them." Walter raised an eyebrow. "I always have a surprise, Gary. Keeps life interesting." He left Gary to his work and headed to the tractor parked by the barn's entrance. A swirl of dust rose around him as he mentally mapped out the tasks for the day. Fertilizing the fields, mending fences, double-checking last season's accounts. Efficiency was how he thrived, but a nagging emptiness had crept in lately. At times, he wondered if there was more to life than just building an empire from dirt. Miles away, Alicia Jackson was also awake. Her phone rang incessantly on the cluttered nightstand. She was in a cramped apartment, 6 floors above an overly congested city street. She pressed her palm to her forehead before finally grabbing the phone. "Hello?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "Girl, you said you'd call me back last night," complained Carmen, her friend and roommate for the last 2 years. "I've been worried." "You're not still crying over that missed interview, are you?" Alicia exhaled, slumping against her pillow. "I'm not crying, but I'm not feeling great either. One more rejection letter. One more job that slipped through my fingers." Carmen's voice softened. "You're talented. You just need a break, maybe a fresh start, something out of your comfort zone." "Anything interesting pop up?" Alicia glanced at her laptop, which displayed a half-finished application for a marketing position she wasn't excited about. "Nothing that speaks to me. Same old story. Too many applicants. Not enough spots." She forced herself out of bed. The worn carpet tickled her toes as she gazed around the tiny living room, partitioned off by a bookshelf doubling as a room divider. Her life felt small, confined, a little hopeless. She glanced out the window, only to see endless concrete, Something about that horizon made her stomach twist with longing for something else. "Maybe you'll find something new soon," Carmen continued, trying to sound upbeat. "I gotta run, but let's talk tonight. Promise me you'll keep your mind open to weird opportunities." "Fine," Alicia mumbled, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. "I promise." Their brief conversation ended, and Alicia stared at the screen of her phone. A wave of determination flickered in her chest. She wouldn't give up. Not yet. Back at the ranch, Walter steered his tractor along the neat rows of newly planted seedlings. Clouds of fertile soil billowed in his wake. The monotony of the work gave space for his thoughts to wander, about his upcoming gathering, about how his friends always poked fun at his single status, about the bet they'd teased him into making. He shook his head, amused by the memory of last weekend's poker night. One friend had declared, "Walter, you could turn any city slicker into a farmhand in a month if you wanted to." "You practically have magic in these fields." Walter, never one to back down from a challenge, had replied with a grin. "I'd bet on it." Now that bet lingered in the air, waiting for him to name the unsuspecting city slicker. Little did he know that, somewhere across that vast country, Alicia Jackson would soon appear in his life, a woman looking for a chance, a new horizon, and maybe a piece of her own forgotten hope. As morning light fully claimed the fields, Walter parked the tractor by a fence. He hopped down, breathed in the fresh country air, and wondered if fate, or maybe a crazy bet, might soon change his world forever. Walter stood on his front porch later that evening, watching dust swirl in the golden twilight. The ranch was quiet, almost too still. He lifted a glass of sweet tea to his lips, thinking about the promises he'd half-jokingly made during last weekend's poker game. His oldest friends, men who knew him well, had called his bluff, insisting he prove his claim, turn a total city girl into a capable ranch hand in just 30 days. He hadn't intended to take them seriously, but each passing day made the idea burrow deeper into his mind. Maybe it was the boredom, maybe it was the thrill of a challenge, or maybe, if he was honest, he was just tired of life's predictability, the stakes of the bet, bragging rights, and a chunk of pocket change. But for Walter, the real thrill was testing if he could still surprise himself. He stepped off the porch and headed toward a small bonfire where a few ranch hands gathered. Smoke curled lazily into the air, and Gary waved him over. "Boss, we were just talking about city folks. You really think they can handle the work out here?" Gary asked, smirking. Walter shrugged. "Some can, some can't." Could be interesting to find out, though. At that same moment, Alicia was hustling across town, weaving through a crowd of tourists as neon signs flickered overhead. Her feet ached in her worn-out heels. She'd been slinging drinks at a local cafe all day, a fill-in job to pay the bills. This definitely wasn't her dream career, but it kept her afloat. With her shift done, she pushed through the glass doors onto a busy street. Yellow taxis honked, and the air smelled like hot pretzels and car exhaust. Alicia paused at a sidewalk vendor selling newspapers and glimmering magazines. One headline caught her eye. "Leave the city behind. Explore the simple life in America's heartland." She stared at the cover photo. A wide-open field, a charming old barn, a sunrise so warm she could practically feel it through the glossy page. Suddenly, she felt a pang of curiosity. What would it be like to escape this concrete sprawl, if only for a while? The notion was absurd, but she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest. She continued home, jostling past impatient pedestrians until she reached her building. Inside, Carmen was perched on the couch. "How was your day, Alicia?" Carmen asked, switching off the TV. Alicia kicked off her shoes with a groan. "Exhausting. Made a few bucks in tips, but I'm dead on my feet." "Well, maybe this'll cheer you up." Carmen held up her phone. "Remember how I said you should stay open to weird opportunities?" I just saw a social media post. Some wealthy rancher's friend is looking for a city woman willing to spend a month on a farm. Crazy, right? They're offering decent money, too. Alicia let out a light laugh. A farm? That's random. Where is this ranch? Carmen shrugged. Somewhere in the Midwest. The post says lodging and meals included, plus a stipend after completing the month. They want someone with zero farm experience so they can train them from scratch. Sounds fishy, but hey, it's money. Alicia's eyes widened. She remembered that magazine cover, The Wave of Longing. You think it's legit? It's from a friend of a friend. Could be. Might be some eccentric bet, but if it pays, who cares? Alicia felt an odd sense of excitement spark in her gut. She pictured farmland bathed in sunshine, a chance to breathe fresh air, an escape from the city that was eating her alive. Could she really do it? She'd never even touched a horse in her life, but the idea of stepping out of her comfort zone was strangely exhilarating. Walter, meanwhile, was sitting at his kitchen table, phone in hand, scanning messages. One from his buddy Rob read, "You find a city gal yet for that bet? Let me know. I posted a notice online. Someone's bound to bite." Walter sighed, half amused, half uneasy. It had been a harmless boast, but now it was a real proposition. He typed back, "We'll see if there's a taker," not holding my breath. He tossed the phone aside and stared out the window at the moonlit fields. The idea was shaping into a test of his patience, of his ability to teach, and maybe of his capacity to connect with another person. He realized that beneath the bravado, he felt isolated. Being the boss meant respect, but it also meant fewer real friends. And living out on all these acres, a man could forget how to let someone else in. Carmen rushed over to Alicia, phone in hand. "Check this out," she said breathlessly. "I just found a contact." "You can send your info to this email." Alicia's mind whirled, heart pounding in her chest. Could she do something so drastic? She recalled all the job rejections, the endless cycle of city hustle. Maybe this was the universe's nudge. "All right," she said softly, a determined edge in her voice. "I'll do it. I'm tired of waiting for life to happen to me." While Alicia drafted her introductory email, Walter scrolled through a local news site, half lost in thought. If someone actually took this bet, he'd have to keep his word. Train them, toughen them up, show them what real work looked like. He felt a flicker of anticipation. Maybe it would be a chance to break his own routine. Maybe it would be an adventure. Little did they know, two restless spirits were about to collide, one seeking escape, the other craving change. And on a dusty country road, fate's wheels were already in motion. The next morning, Alicia checked her email and nearly dropped her phone. There it was, a surprisingly prompt reply from someone named Robert Murray, claiming to represent a Walter Cooper. Her heart hammered as she scanned the text. "Mrs. Jackson, thank you for your interest. Mr. Cooper is seeking a city-based candidate willing to spend 30 days on his ranch in Nebraska. The role includes daily farm chores, training in basic ranch operations, and a modest weekly allowance. If you complete the full month, there's a bonus. Please let me know if you'd like to discuss details." Alicia sat at the small dining table, a mixture of nerves and excitement flooding her. Carmen peered over her shoulder. "Wow," Carmen muttered. "It's real. What you gonna do?" Alicia rubbed her temples. "I guess I'll talk to this Robert guy, see if it's legit. I mean, Nebraska, that's a long way from here." Carmen gave her a gentle nudge. "You've been craving a change. This might be it." Meanwhile, Walter was halfway through his morning chores. He'd just finished stacking hay bales when he got a text from Rob. "We got a real candidate. Name's Alicia Jackson, from the city. She wants more info. You ready for this?" Walter felt his chest tighten with a blend of anticipation and mild panic. The bet had sounded amusing after a few beers, but now it felt all too real. Still, he had never run from a challenge. He typed back, "Sure. Set up a call. Let's see if she's serious." With that, he wiped the sweat from his forehead, squared his shoulders, and headed for the ranch house, imagining what kind of person would answer such an unusual offer. An hour later, Alicia's phone buzzed. "Hello, this is Robert Murray," the voice said, polite and formal. "I work with Mr. Walter Cooper. He asked me to gather more information from you. Are you available for a quick chat?" Alicia swallowed hard. "Yes, absolutely." "Excellent. Mr. Cooper wants someone with zero farm experience. Could you confirm your background?" Alicia laughed nervously. "I'm about as city as they come. I've never been on a farm, never seen a tractor up close, and I'm not even sure how to saddle a horse." Robert's tone sounded satisfied. "Perfect. That's exactly what Walter's looking for. However, be aware, you'll be expected to follow strict schedules, get your hands dirty, and adjust to rural life. Think you can handle it?" Her pulse quickened. "I'm willing to try. But why would Mr. Cooper want someone untrained?" A brief pause. "He believes anyone can learn to appreciate the countryside if given the right guidance. That's all I can say. Are you interested enough to speak with him directly?" Alicia inhaled. "Yes. I'd like that." Soon after, her phone buzzed again. This time, the voice was deeper, a slight rasp hinting at hours spent outdoors. "This is Walter Cooper," he said, his accent lightly Midwestern. "Rob says you might be our city candidate." "That true?" Alicia forced herself to stay calm. "I guess so. My name's Alicia Jackson." Walter exhaled thoughtfully. "Alicia Jackson. Well, I'm looking for someone who's never set foot on a ranch and who's willing to do real labor for a month. You sure you want that?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I won't lie, I'm a little scared. But I'm also curious. Life here in the city, it's wearing me down." Walter's voice softened. "I get it. Sometimes a change of scenery can do wonders. All right, here's the deal. You come out next week. You stay for 30 days. If you last the full month, you get a bonus. Do we have a deal?" Alicia's heart drummed. "Yes," she said quietly. Then with more confidence, "Yes, we have a deal." They settled a few logistical details, travel arrangements, lodging, the tasks she'd be expected to do. Walter maintained a polite but guarded tone, making it clear he wouldn't go easy on her. Alicia matched his determination with her own brand of grit. After the call ended, Walter stood in his home office, phone still in hand. He stared at the photograph of his late father on the wall, recalling how the old man used to say, "Never underestimate the power of a new perspective." Walter wondered if Alicia might just be the perspective he needed. He smirked at the thought of winning the bet with his friends, but an undercurrent of uncertainty tugged at him. Alicia, on the other end, was trembling with equal parts fear and excitement. She looked around her cramped apartment, thinking, "Is this really happening?" Carmen grabbed her hands and jumped up and down. "You did it!" Carmen squealed. "You're going to a ranch." Alicia laughed, letting the energy of the moment wash over her. "I know it's crazy, but maybe it's exactly what I need." Over the next few days, Alicia read every snippet she could find online about farm life. She watched YouTube videos of ranch chores, from feeding animals to mucking stalls, her stomach flipping at the sheer difference from her city routine. She packed sturdy clothes, boots, and tried to temper her growing anxiety with the promise of a fresh start. Walter, for his part, prepared one of the guest rooms in the ranch house, something he rarely did. He teased Gary about how some city gal would try to last a month. Gary snorted, crossing his arms. "Boss, you sure about this? She might run off the first day she sees a snake." Walter grinned. Then I'll have a good story to tell. And if she doesn't run, well, that'll be interesting too. In the backdrop, the bet loomed. Walter's friends waited eagerly for updates, confident they'd see pictures of a baffled city girl cowering at the sight of a muddy field. Yet beneath the jokes and wagers lay an unspoken possibility that two lonely souls might find something in each other they never expected. True connection. Alicia stood in her bedroom, the dawn light creeping through half-drawn blinds. Two suitcases lay open on her bed, clothes and shoes scattered around as she tried to decide what to pack for an entire month of rural living. Jeans, T-shirts, a couple of flannels she'd picked up at a thrift store, plus sturdy boots she'd never worn. Her heart pounded each time she realized how real this was. Tomorrow, she would be on a plane to Nebraska, somewhere she'd never even considered visiting. Carmen bustled in, holding a small first aid kit and an encouraging grin. "You might need this, you know, in case of scratches or bug bites." Alicia shook her head with a half-smile. "Thank you. I'm still not sure I know what I'm doing." Carmen placed a hand on Alicia's shoulder. "Listen, you need this. You've been stuck in a rut for too long. Maybe you'll hate it, or maybe you'll love it. Either way, you'll learn something." Meanwhile, Walter paced around his living room, phone in hand, texting Rob. "She arrives tomorrow. Make sure everything's ready." Outside, the ranch hands were buzzing with excitement about the newcomer. Gary laughed, telling stories of city folk he'd seen on TV shows, struggling to adapt to rural life. Walter tried to act nonchalant, but his mind wrestled with a swirl of uncertainties. He had an uneasy feeling he couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was fear of the unknown. What if Alicia turned out to be more of a handful than he anticipated? Or maybe it was something deeper, a worry that letting someone into his world might unearth old vulnerabilities. That afternoon, Walter drove into the nearest town for supplies. He stopped by a hardware store to pick up extra gloves, a sturdy shovel, and some new fence posts. The store manager, Tessa, greeted him warmly. "Haven't seen you in a while, Walt. The ranch keeping you busy?" He nodded, tossing fence posts into his truck bed. "Always, but I'm preparing for a visitor. She's from the city." Tessa raised an eyebrow. "Oh. Got a lady friend coming by." Walter's cheeks warmed a little, but he shrugged. "Not like that. It's a business arrangement. She's here to learn about farm life." Tessa laughed knowingly. Sure. You just take care of her, you hear? City folks can be fragile." Walter forced a grin. "I'll try my best." Back in her apartment, Alicia closed her suitcase and scanned the room for anything she'd forgotten. She spotted a small photo on her nightstand, her and her mother smiling at some carnival years ago. Alicia's mother had passed away unexpectedly when Alicia was still in college. Losing her had been a turning point, forcing Alicia to become fiercely independent. Now, as she eyed that photo, a pang of loneliness coursed through her. She silently hoped this leap of faith might guide her to a place where she could finally find peace, or, at least, a renewed sense of self. Early the next morning, Alicia dragged her luggage down the hallway and stepped outside. A taxi awaited, courtesy of a prepaid voucher from Robert. The drive to the airport felt like an out-of-body experience, the city's skyscrapers sliding by as if waving goodbye. She boarded the plane, her nerves fluttering. The flight was short, less than 3 hours, and she spent most of it gazing out the window, imagining what Nebraska would look like. When she finally landed, she expected a bustling terminal, but this airport was quiet, almost serene. Stepping outside, she was greeted by a wide-open sky that seemed bluer than anything she'd ever seen. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number Robert had given her. "Hey, it's Alicia. I just landed." "Great," Robert replied. "Walter should be there soon to pick you up in his truck. You'll spot him, tall guy, cowboy hat, can't miss him." Sure enough, within minutes, she saw a shiny black pickup pull up by the curb. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a worn leather hat. He scanned the crowd with a confident yet guarded expression. Their eyes met. Alicia felt a quick jolt of energy, something between apprehension and curiosity. Walter approached, tipping his hat slightly. "You, Alicia Jackson?" She nodded, extending her hand. "That's me." He shook her hand, his grip firm. "Walter Cooper, pleasure to meet you. Let me help you with your bags." She noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the tan on his skin, and the directness of his gaze. He looked exactly like the quintessential rancher she'd pictured. Practical, sturdy, maybe a bit closed off. She climbed into the passenger seat, swallowing her nerves as the truck rumbled to life. The drive through the countryside felt endless to Alicia. Fields stretched out on either side, dotted with livestock and the occasional barn. The sky seemed to go on forever. Walter tried to make polite conversation, asking about her flight, her background, her reason for signing up for such a crazy idea. Alicia stumbled through answers, her voice betraying both excitement and worry. He offered a curt nod after each response, and silence settled between them. Eventually, Alicia cleared her throat. "So, is this really about teaching a city person ranch work, or is there more to it?" Walter glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "It started as a bet with friends, if I'm being honest. But I don't do anything half-hearted. Once I say I'll do it, I do it right." She felt a flicker of surprise. "A bet?" He shrugged, tightening his grip on the steering wheel. "They claimed I couldn't train someone from the city to handle real farm life in a month. I disagreed. There's money on the line, but let's not dwell on that. Let's just get you settled first." Alicia stared out the window, a knot forming in her stomach. So she was part of some wager. She had a flash of anger, but it quickly mingled with defiance. If they thought she was just a clueless city girl, she'd prove them wrong. She turned back to Walter with a determined set to her jaw. "Fine, I'll give it my best shot." Walter nodded, as if accepting her challenge. But beneath his stoic facade, doubt churned. He'd roped himself into this. He just hoped he wasn't biting off more than he could chew. The truck sped on, carrying them deeper into the vast countryside, toward an uncertain month that would test them both. The pickup truck rumbled down a gravel road leading to Walter's ranch, kicking up a swirl of dust in its wake. Alicia gazed out the window, her eyes drinking in the sweeping fields. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in a warm glow. Row upon row of crops stretched far as she could see, lined by rustic fences. She let out a quiet gasp. It was beautiful and intimidating. Walter slowed near the main house, a sturdy two-story home with white siding and a broad wraparound porch. Off to the side, she spotted a barn, corrals, and a few smaller outbuildings. Horses grazed calmly in a nearby pasture. Alicia could hardly believe this was her new home for the next month. As she climbed out of the truck, Gary emerged from the barn, lifting his straw hat in greeting. "Well, boss, you weren't kidding. We got ourselves a city gal." Walter's jaw flexed slightly. "This is Alicia Jackson. She'll be staying with us for a month, learning the ropes." Gary offered a friendly grin. "Nice to meet you, ma'am. I'm Gary. Don't let the boss scare you. He's all bark, no bite." Alicia couldn't help but smile back. "Nice to meet you. I'm excited. Just a little nervous." Gary chuckled. "That's normal. You'll be knee-deep in chores before you know it." Walter grabbed Alicia's suitcases and gestured for her to follow him inside. The house was surprisingly welcoming, with wooden floors, a cozy living room, and the faint aroma of something savory drifting from the kitchen. "I've put you in the guest room upstairs," he told her. "You'll have your own bathroom. We usually eat dinner around 7. Tomorrow morning, we start at dawn." Alicia nodded, her nerves flaring again. "Dawn, got it. And I'm guessing it's not optional." Walter's lips curled slightly. "Nope, not optional at all. Ranch life doesn't pause for tired eyes." She followed him up the wooden staircase, taking in the pictures lining the walls. Family photos, it seemed. She spotted one of Walter as a much younger man with another older man, likely his father. Both wore cowboy hats, broad smiles on their faces. There was a softness in Walter's expression in that photo she hadn't seen yet. He led her to a small bedroom with a simple bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the fields. The view was breathtaking. Alicia dropped her bag on the bed, turning to face Walter. "Thank you. This is really nice." He nodded curtly, setting her suitcase down. "Settle in. Dinner in an hour. If you need anything, I'll be downstairs." She watched him leave, the door clicking shut behind him. Suddenly alone, Alicia exhaled a trembling breath. She stared out the window, the wide-open fields calling her toward an unfamiliar destiny. She thought about the bet he'd mentioned in the truck. Part of her felt used, like a pawn in some game, but another part was fiercely determined to prove she could handle this. When she stepped downstairs for dinner, she found a modest spread: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, steamed vegetables, and cornbread. Gary took his seat, along with another ranch hand named Marco. Walter gestured for Alicia to join them. She slid into a chair, forcing a small smile. "Smells amazing," Gary winked. "Marco here is a wizard in the kitchen." Marco shrugged bashfully. "It's just something I enjoy. Cooking helps me unwind." Walter served Alicia some chicken, and for a moment they all ate in a comfortable silence. The food was hearty, the mood surprisingly relaxed. Eventually, Gary began recounting a story of how he once rescued a stray dog in the middle of a thunderstorm. Alicia laughed at his animated gestures, feeling some of her tension slip away. After dinner, Walter handed Alicia a schedule for the week. "Tomorrow," he explained, "you'll help me feed the horses, gather eggs from the chicken coop, and then we'll work on mending fences. In the afternoon, you'll learn how to check for pests on the crops." Alicia scanned the list, eyebrows climbing higher with each task. "That's a lot." He shrugged. "It's daily life here. You said you wanted in, so here it is." Later, as dusk settled, Alicia stepped outside alone. The sky was painted with streaks of pink and orange. Instead of city lights and honking cars, she heard crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. She felt a tug of wonder and a stab of homesickness all at once. A gentle breeze rustled her hair, carrying the scent of hay. Behind her, Walter appeared quietly. He stood a few steps away, arms crossed, gazing at the same horizon. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Alicia broke the silence. "This place is beautiful." Walter nodded, his voice low. "It can be. Also can be harsh." She glanced at him, noticing the lines of weariness and pride etched into his face. "I'm ready to work, you know. I don't want any special treatment." He looked her in the eye, a flicker of respect in his gaze. "Good. You'll need that attitude." They stood there side by side, strangers sharing a quiet moment that vibrated with possibility. The bet was real, the stakes set. But deeper than that, something else simmered, an unspoken question of whether they were both searching for the same thing, proof that change was still possible in their lives. When Alicia finally retreated to her room, her mind raced. Tomorrow would be her first real day as a ranch hand. She had no idea how she'd handle the early morning or the physical strain. But for the first time in a long while, she felt alive, brimming with anticipation and a spark of courage she thought she'd lost. Meanwhile, Walter lingered outside, eyes fixed on the horizon, wondering if he'd opened a door he couldn't easily close. Thus, with their first evening at the ranch behind them, the stage was set for the coming trials, triumphs, doubts, and discoveries, a journey that would test not just Alicia's endurance, but Walter's guarded heart as well. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Alicia Jackson's alarm buzzed her awake. She blinked in the dimly lit guest room, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The farmhouse walls, the scent of coffee drifting upstairs, the faint clamor of animals stirring outside. She sat up, heart thudding with the realization her new life as a ranch hand was about to begin. Downstairs, Walter Cooper stood at the kitchen counter, pouring fresh coffee into 2 mugs. He glanced at the clock. The old floorboards creaked under Alicia's footsteps as she approached, her hair still a bit tangled from sleep. "Morning," Walter said quietly, sliding 1 mug toward her. "I figured you could use a jolt of caffeine." Alicia thanked him, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. She sipped tentatively, trying to steady her nerves. "Today's tasks," Walter continued, "start with feeding the horses. Then we'll move on to cleaning out the stables." Alicia forced a small, determined smile. "Sounds good. I'm ready." Outside, the early light painted the landscape in soft gold. The sweet scent of dew-soaked grass surrounded them as they crossed the yard to the stables. Horses whinnied in greeting, their large eyes darting to Alicia, clearly curious about the newcomer. Walter showed her where the feed was stored, the correct portions for each horse, and the calm manner in which to approach them. "Never spook a horse," he warned, "especially when it's feeding time. They can get jumpy." She nodded, carefully following his instructions. Her initial awkwardness left her feeling silly, but she refused to back down. She'd never touched a horse before, and her heart pounded each time one snorted or stamped a hoof. Yajit, the animal's gentle presence, began to melt some of her anxiety. By mid-morning, Alicia was already exhausted. Her arms ached from hauling heavy buckets of water, her hair clung to her forehead in sweaty strands, and she had straw stuck in random places. But a sense of fulfillment coursed through her as she stepped back to admire the freshly cleaned stalls. She'd done something tangible, something she could see. Walter noted her effort with a curt nod, though a faint glimmer of approval softened his eyes. "Not bad for a first day," he said, leaning against a stable wall. "You didn't run screaming out of here, so that's a plus." She laughed, the sound echoing in the wooden space. "I'm not giving up that easily." Gary ambled in, tipping his hat. "Boss, the fencing crew will be here soon to work on that broken stretch by the south field." Walter turned to Alicia. "Perfect timing. You'll ride along in the truck. I'll show you how we handle repairs." Alicia's heart fluttered at the thought of seeing more of the ranch, but the word ride caught her. "Wait, by ride along, you mean in the truck, right?" Walter smirked. "Yes, Alicia. We won't put you on a horse just yet." They climbed into Walter's pickup and bounced across dirt roads, passing wide expanses of tall grass. Alicia felt the dryness in her throat. She was used to city blocks and concrete sidewalks, but out here, everything stretched endlessly in every direction. It was as exhilarating as it was intimidating. When they reached the south field, a small team of workers was already unloading posts and tools from another truck. Walter hopped out and began talking with them, while Alicia lingered, observing the broken fence line. Sunlight sparkled on shards of splintered wood. She reached out to touch the jagged edge, feeling its roughness against her fingertips. Walter glanced over. "We'll replace this entire section. Brace it properly. Think you can handle a hammer?" Alicia took a breath, squared her shoulders. "I can handle a hammer." They spent the next few hours working in the sun, Alicia sweating through her shirt as she tried to keep pace. Walter demonstrated the correct way to drive a nail without bending it, then let her try for herself. The rhythmic pounding of hammers filled the air, accompanied by the murmurs of passing conversations among the ranch hands. Occasionally, someone cracked a joke about Alicia's unsteady form, but she fired back with quick wit and a bright smile that caught them off guard. By lunchtime, her arms felt like they might detach from her shoulders. Yet the fence started to look solid, stable, something she'd had a direct hand in building. A small flicker of pride glowed inside her. They broke for a quick meal under the shade of a large oak tree. Gary handed Alicia a sandwich wrapped in foil. "You're doing all right, Alicia. Most newbies complain like crazy, but you're hanging in there." She chewed gratefully, thirstily sipping cold water from a canteen. "I'm too busy trying not to smash my fingers," she joked. No time to complain. Walter, leaning against the trunk, studied her quietly. "There are people who talk about hard work, and those who do it. I respect the doers." Alicia blushed faintly at the compliment, if one could call it that. As the day wore on, the Nebraska sun beat down on them without mercy. Alicia's skin grew warm, and she realized she'd need better sun protection. By late afternoon, the fence stood complete. The final nails were driven in, and the ranch hands started packing up. Alicia winced as she stretched her aching back, but a sense of accomplishment radiated in her chest. Walter motioned her over, his voice calm and low. "Not bad, city girl. Head back, wash up, then we'll talk about tomorrow's plan at dinner." She brushed a stray piece of straw from her hair and nodded, exhausted but content. "Sounds good, boss," she teased, echoing Gary's manner of address. A ghost of a smile touched Walter's lips. He turned away, scanning the horizon as if searching for something in the distance, but Alicia sensed a subtle shift in his demeanor. He was beginning to let her in, step by cautious step. That evening, while Alicia washed the grime off in a hot shower, she reflected on the day. Despite the physical pain, she felt oddly alive. Memories of rejection letters and cramped city apartments seemed distant. In their place stood open fields, horses, and a man whose quiet pride and guarded kindness intrigued her. Little did she know, across the hallway, Walter was lost in his own thoughts, reminding himself this arrangement was just part of a bet, something to pass the time. But he couldn't ignore the spark in Alicia's eyes, that burning grit he hadn't anticipated, and against his better judgment, he found himself wanting to see more of it. They were two people on a collision course with possibilities neither had imagined, and as the night settled over the ranch, both drifted to sleep, bracing for the new routines awaiting them at dawn, and the unexpected truths bound to emerge along the way. The second day on the ranch began much like the first, with the shrill call of Alicia's alarm and the promise of backbreaking tasks. She rubbed sleep from her eyes, wincing at the lingering soreness in her muscles, then trudged downstairs to find Walter already in the kitchen. He was placing 2 plates of scrambled eggs and bacon on the table. "Morning," he said, nodding toward a seat. "Morning." Alicia dropped into the chair, grateful for the hot meal. "So, what's on the schedule today?" Walter took a sip of coffee. "We'll move to the chicken coop first, gather eggs, clean up. Then we'll check on the vegetable plots. Might have to deal with some pesky insects. After lunch, I need you in the barn to help Gary reorganize supplies." Alicia chewed thoughtfully, absorbing the list. "I've only ever seen eggs in cartons at the store. Any chance these chickens will attack me?" she asked, half joking. Walter shrugged, a ghost of a smile curving his mouth. "They're not aggressive, but they can peck. Wear gloves, move slowly, and you'll be fine." After breakfast, they headed to the chicken coop. The air smelled of straw and feed, and the soft clucking of hens filled Alicia's ears. She tried to mimic Walter's calm approach, reaching into a nesting box to retrieve a warm egg. The hens squawked indignantly, causing Alicia to jerk back, nearly dropping her prize. Walter chuckled from across the coop. "You'll get used to it," he said. "They're just territorial. Don't take it personally." Steadying her nerves, Alicia managed to gather a small basketful. By the time she emerged, her cheeks were flushed with a mix of effort and triumph. "Not so bad," she said under her breath, earning an approving nod from Walter. Next came the vegetable plots, neat rows of lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. Walter crouched by a row of tomatoes, pointing out tiny holes in the leaves. Looks like caterpillars. We try to keep pesticides minimal, so we'll remove them by hand when possible. Alicia wrinkled her nose. Picking off bugs by hand wasn't in the flyer? He raised an eyebrow. You want to eat clean produce or chemical-laden stuff? Fine, she relented, mustering her courage to remove a plump green caterpillar from a leaf, dropping it into a small container. She couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. At least they're kinda cute, she murmured. Walter huffed a low laugh. You might be the first person here who finds them cute. An hour later, Alicia's gloves were smeared with dirt and her hair clung to her forehead in damp curls. She felt oddly proud of herself. This was real work, immediate results, immediate impact. Her old life, filled with crowded sidewalks and electronic job applications, felt far away. They took a brief break for lunch, joining Gary and Marco at a picnic table under a large elm tree. Marco had made sandwiches again, which Alicia devoured with gusto. How's it going, new girl? Marco teased, passing her a canteen of water. Alicia grinned. I'll spare you the details, but let's just say I have a new respect for caterpillars. Gary tossed his napkin aside. Wait till we introduce you to the goats. They're a whole different level of trouble. Walter cleared his throat. Let's not scare her off just yet. After lunch, Alicia followed Gary to the barn, where dusty shelves and overflowing bins greeted them. She swallowed a groan. Gary pointed at the maze of tools, ropes, and stacked bags of grain. We need to reorganize everything so we can find what we need quickly. Start by labeling the bins, sorting out what's expired, what's broken, and what belongs in storage. Alicia set to work, rummaging through the chaos. She sneezed a few times from the stirred-up dust, but gradually she started seeing the barn transform into a more efficient space. She even discovered a small stash of old photographs tucked away in a battered box, snapshots of the ranch from decades ago, including a younger Walter standing next to a tractor, looking determined and far less guarded. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Gary clapped her on the shoulder. You did good. The barn's already looking better. Alicia grinned, feeling a wave of pride. Thanks, it's actually kind of satisfying seeing the before and after. He tipped his hat. That's ranch life. You get to witness real progress, day by day. Later, back in the house, Alicia took a moment to call her friend Carmen. She wandered onto the porch, phone in hand, watching shadows stretch across the fields. How are you, city slicker? Carmen's voice crackled through the line. I'm filthy, sweaty, and sore, Alicia replied, a smile evident in her tone. And oddly happy? Carmen chuckled. That's the best news I've heard all week. You sound more alive than you have in months. Think you'll stick it out? Alicia glanced at a tractor in the distance, driven by Walter. The man looked like part of the land itself, steady, unflinching. I'm going to try. Something about this place is grounding, but it's not easy. I still have to remind myself why I came. Carmen's voice softened. Because you needed a change, and maybe because you're meant to be there. They wrapped up the call, and Alicia lingered on the porch steps, letting the evening breeze cool her skin. Moments later, Walter appeared behind her, removing his hat to run a hand through sweat-dampened hair. Long day, he said, settling onto the porch railing. You're telling me, she shot back, though her grin was playful. He regarded her quietly. You're picking things up quicker than I thought. Alicia's heart fluttered at the compliment. Thanks. I'm still worried I'll do something wrong, like let the chickens escape or overwater the garden. Walter's gaze drifted toward the horizon. Mistakes happen. You learn, move on. Something in his voice carried a faint sadness, a subtle note of regret. Before she could ask more, he shifted off the railing and offered her a curt nod. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another early one. She watched him disappear into the house, intrigued by the unspoken weight in his tone. There were layers to Walter Cooper that she hadn't expected, and she wondered if the next few weeks would peel them back, one day at a time. With the sky darkening above, Alicia breathed in the sweet country air. Her muscles ached, her clothes still dusted with straw, yet she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was a new chapter, full of learning curves, physically, emotionally, and maybe even romantically. By day 3, Alicia had developed a cautious confidence in her tasks, enough to feed the horses without flinching, to gather eggs without fleeing the coop, and to toss bales of hay, albeit clumsily, onto a trailer. Yet every muscle in her body screamed in protest each night. One afternoon, Walter asked her to assist with a new job, caring for a broodmare named Rosie, who was due to foal in a matter of weeks. The large chestnut mare had a gentle demeanor, but she was protective of her growing belly. Walter guided Alicia to Rosie's stall. "She needs regular brushing and a calm presence," he explained. "Mares can be moody when they're pregnant, so move slow." Alicia reached out with cautious hands, softly brushing Rosie's flank. She felt the horse's warmth beneath the brushstrokes, the rhythmic heave of her breath. A sudden pang of tenderness washed over Alicia, reminding her of how fragile life could be. Walter hovered at the edge of the stall, arms crossed, watching. "Keep going. She seems to like your touch." Alicia glanced over her shoulder. "It's kind of amazing," she said softly. "I never realized how... Living on a ranch means you're surrounded by life all the time." Walter's gaze flickered. "That's the draw for me. You see birth, growth, hard work. It's real." They finished brushing Rosie, refilled her water, and checked her feed. Alicia turned to leave, but Walter cleared his throat. "I need your help with one more thing. Gary's out fixing a tractor, so you're the only one left." Her pulse sped up. "Sure. What is it?" He led her to a nearby hayloft. The air smelled of dust and dried grass. A tall ladder led to an upper level packed with bales. "We have to clear a path up there, toss down any old bales. Think you can handle climbing?" Alicia eyed the ladder warily but nodded. "I'll manage." Once up top, they navigated the narrow space. Walter pointed to a stack of bales that needed replacing. Together, they pried them loose, tossing them down onto the barn floor. The physical effort left Alicia breathless, but she also felt an odd sense of camaraderie with Walter, two people working side by side, wordlessly in sync. When the last bale was pushed over, Alicia leaned against a beam, panting, her shirt clinging to her back. Walter paused, his chest rising and falling with effort. He removed his gloves, then ran a hand over his forehead. "Not bad," he murmured. Alicia met his eyes. "You say that a lot." "Not bad? Is that your highest form of praise?" A faint smirk touched his lips. "Maybe I'll surprise you one day with something more enthusiastic." The moment stretched, a fragile quiet between them. Alicia felt her cheeks warm, and she realized she was seeing a rare glimpse of Walter without his guarded demeanor, just a man who worked hard, who might be lonely, who might be more than a simple rancher. Before she could speak, a sudden slip of her foot caused her to lurch sideways, grabbing onto the beam for support. Walter lunged forward, steadying her with a firm grip on her arm. "Careful," he admonished, voice laced with concern. Alicia's heart hammered. "Thanks," she breathed, shaken by how close she'd come to tumbling off the loft. Walter's hand lingered a moment longer than necessary, and when he pulled away, she sensed the tension between them, unspoken but electric. They climbed down in silence, disposing of the old bales outside. Gary ambled over, wiping grease from his hands. "Looks like you two got quite the workout," he observed, with a mischievous grin. Alicia rolled her eyes, trying to hide her flushed face. "Yeah, thanks for missing all the fun." After a quick break to hydrate, Walter announced he had errands to run in town. offering Alicia the chance to ride along. She hesitated, but curiosity won out. She'd only seen the small farm lanes. The local town was still a mystery. The 20-minute drive was filled with the hum of the truck engine and a comfortable quiet. Alicia gazed out the window at fields fading into smaller homesteads, then eventually to a modest main street with a few shops, a diner, and a hardware store. Walter parked outside a feed supply store. "I'll be quick. You can browse if you want." While Walter negotiated prices with the store manager, Alicia wandered along the nearby sidewalk. A quaint bookstore caught her eye. Through the window display, she glimpsed a cozy interior lined with shelves of second-hand novels. Stepping inside, she breathed in the comforting aroma of old pages. She couldn't resist picking up a worn copy of a classic romance novel, its edges frayed, the cover art faded. As she skimmed the first page, she thought about the feeling she got earlier in the loft when Walter had steadied her. It was ridiculous, she told herself. This was just a temporary gig, a bet for him, a chance for her to earn some money and escape city life for a while. Yet she couldn't shake the sense that something was shifting inside her. Maybe it was the wide-open spaces or the hands-on work. Maybe it was simply seeing another side of Walter, whose presence both unsettled and intrigued her. When Walter found her in the bookstore, he lifted an eyebrow at the novel in her hands. "Didn't peg you for a romantic," he teased. Alicia slipped the book back onto the shelf, clearing her throat. "I'm full of surprises." "Ready to go?" He nodded, his gaze lingering. "Yeah, let's head back." On the ride home, Alicia gazed at the passing scenery. She realized she felt a twinge of disappointment about leaving the little town so soon. There was a simple charm here that called to her, so different from the stress and noise she'd left behind. Back at the ranch, twilight was already draping the fields in shades of lavender and gold. As Alicia stepped out of the truck, Walter paused, keys dangling from his fingers. "Thanks for helping out today," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "It's been nice having you here." Alicia blinked, caught off guard. Thank you. I mean, it's nice to be here." He gave her a short nod, then headed off to put away the supplies. Alicia watched him go, her heart fluttering unsteadily. Each day, she was discovering new layers to ranch life and to the man who'd brought her here. Those glimpses of vulnerability, fleeting though they were, kept sparking questions in her mind that she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. By the end of Alicia's first week on the ranch, a curious rhythm had taken hold of her days. Waking at dawn, tackling chores she never dreamed she'd handle, learning to appreciate the hush of early morning fields and the vivid colors of Nebraska sunsets. In the evenings, she fell into bed, bone-tired, yet oddly energized. One Saturday, Walter decided it was time for a break from the grind. "You've earned it," he told Alicia at breakfast. "We're having a small get-together tonight. Some music, barbecue, maybe a little dancing." Alicia nearly choked on her coffee. "Dancing? I haven't done that since a friend's wedding years ago." Walter shrugged. "It's tradition around here. Folks in the area like to gather, swap stories, unwind. You might enjoy it." All day, the ranch buzzed with preparations. Gary and Marco set up folding tables and a makeshift dance floor under a string of lights. Alicia helped arrange chairs, her stomach fluttering at the thought of meeting more locals. As evening fell, trucks and cars pulled in, headlights illuminating the yard. Country music wafted through the air from a portable speaker. Alicia stood off to the side, feeling shy in her slightly nicer jeans and a plaid shirt Carmen had insisted she pack. Walter introduced her to a few of his neighbors, an older couple named Mr. and Mrs. Watkins, who cooed over Alicia's big city background, and a jovial rancher named James, who kept inviting everyone to sample his homemade barbecue sauce. Alicia felt the swirl of small-town warmth, a stark contrast to the anonymity of city life. Soon, groups formed around the tables laden with food, ribs, coleslaw, grilled corn on the cob, and an assortment of pies. Alicia loaded her plate, her mouth watering at the sight. As she moved through the gathering, she spotted Walter standing with two men who bore a striking resemblance to him in build and demeanor. She guessed they might be some of the buddies who teased him into this bet. Trying not to eavesdrop, Alicia still caught a snippet of their conversation. "So this is the city girl you claimed you could train up, huh?" one of them joked. Walter's posture tensed. "Don't start," he muttered. Alicia pretended not to notice, but her cheeks flushed. She'd known about the bet from the beginning, yet hearing it out loud stung. When Walter caught her eye, she offered a polite nod and moved on, finding a seat at an empty table. A moment later, Marco joined her, setting down a plate. "Don't mind those guys," he said quietly, clearly having noticed the tension. "They're good people, just like to stir the pot." She forced a smile. "I'm fine." "This barbecue is amazing, by the way." Marco grinned. "Oh, just wait till dessert." As twilight deepened, someone turned the music up, and a few couples drifted to the dance area. The vibe shifted into a jovial, light-hearted atmosphere. Laughter mingled with the scent of grilled food. A gentle breeze tugged at Alicia's hair, and she found herself tapping her foot in time to the twang of the guitar. Gary plopped down next to her with a grin. "Come on, city girl, let's see if you can two-step." She gave an uncertain laugh. "I'm not sure I can." "Neither am I," he said, jumping up and offering his hand. "But it's fun." She let him lead her onto the makeshift dance floor. The steps were simpler than she feared, and soon she was spinning around under the glow of string lights, giggling each time Gary slipped up or stepped on her boot. The moment felt surreal, a city woman dancing in the middle of a Nebraska ranch party, sweat-soaked from a week of hard labor, yet strangely blissful. When the song ended, Gary bowed theatrically and sauntered off to get more food. Alicia stood, catching her breath. Before she could leave the dance floor, Walter approached, his expression somewhere between amused and hesitant. "You looked like you were having fun," he said. She wiped her brow. "I was, actually." "Gary's got some moves, sort of." Walter shoved his hands in his pockets. "He does all right. Want to try with someone else?" Her eyes flickered with surprise. "You mean you want to dance with me?" He nodded, looking suddenly uncertain. "It's just a dance, Alicia." Swallowing a burst of nerves, she placed her hand in his. The music shifted to a slower tune, the kind that made couples press closer together. Walter placed a careful hand at her waist, and they began an unhurried sway. For a moment, Alicia forgot about the bet, the chores, her city life. All she could feel was Walter's warmth and the steadiness of his arm guiding her. Soft laughter and conversation surrounded them, but it felt like a distant hum. She dared to look up at him. He met her gaze, a softness in his eyes that she hadn't noticed before. Neither spoke, yet a kind of dialogue flowed between them, hope, curiosity, maybe even longing. The warmth of his touch against the small of her back sent tingles up her spine. She had to remind herself that this was temporary, that she would eventually leave and return to the concrete sprawl. When the song ended, Walter cleared his throat, releasing her hand gently. "Not bad," he murmured, reverting to his usual phrase. Alicia smiled, cheeks flushed from more than just the dancing. "Thanks. You're pretty good yourself." As the night wound down, guests gradually departed, calling goodbyes and waving from their vehicles. Alicia helped gather plates and cups, her mind replaying that dance over and over. She couldn't remember the last time she felt so alive, so present. Much later, when she finally climbed into bed, the distant echo of guitar chords lingered in her ears. She thought about the subtle tension she'd felt holding Walter's gaze, the safety of his hand on her waist. A pang of confusion tugged at her. She was here on a bet, but it was quickly becoming something else, something deeper. Outside her window, the ranch settled into quiet stillness, and though exhaustion pulled her towards sleep, Alicia couldn't chase away the swirl of possibilities dancing in her heart. The days following the barbecue slipped into a gentle routine, punctuated by fleeting moments that felt charged with unspoken tension. Alicia noticed the way Walter's gaze lingered on her when she accomplished a new task. She caught herself blushing when she remembered how his hand felt against her back during the dance. A week and a half into her stay, she woke early to find Walter waiting by the truck, engine idling. "Come on," he said, tipping his hat. "We're checking on the far fields today." She hopped in, curiosity piqued. "We've never gone that far before." "What's out there?" "Mostly pasture, some grazing cattle. But the fence line needs a once-over, and we've got an irrigation pump that's been acting up." The drive took nearly an hour. Alicia studied the passing scenery, the farmland gradually turning to rolling grasslands. Eventually, they parked near a pond surrounded by tall grass. Walter grabbed a toolkit from the truck bed, and they approached a small pump house. "Let's see what's going on," he said, kneeling down to check the equipment. Alicia crouched beside him, handing him wrenches or screwdrivers as requested. The midday sun beat down, and Alicia wiped sweat from her brow. Despite the heat, she found the moment oddly tranquil. Just the two of them, the sound of insects buzzing, and the steady rumble of water flowing through irrigation pipes. After an hour of tinkering, Walter exhaled in frustration. "This pump might need a new part. I'll have to order it." He stood, stretching his back. Alicia glanced around at the vast expanse of land, noticing a lone oak tree a short distance away. "It's beautiful here," she murmured. "I didn't know Nebraska could look like this." Walter nodded. "People underestimate it." They strolled over to the oak tree, seeking respite from the sun. Walter set the toolkit aside, pulling out 2 water bottles from a small cooler. Alicia took one gratefully, gulping down the cool liquid. He looked up at the branches swaying overhead. "I used to come out here with my dad when I was a kid," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "He taught me how to fish in that pond." Alicia felt a gentle warmth spread through her chest. "Do you still fish?" Walter shook his head. "No time, really. After he passed, I got caught up in running the ranch." She hesitated, then ventured, "Is that why you work so hard, to keep his legacy alive?" He paused, the lines on his face deepening. "That's part of it, but sometimes I think I just bury myself in the work to avoid feeling anything else." His honesty caught her off guard. She studied him, noticing the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. It reminded her of the day in the hayloft when he'd reached out to steady her. She inched closer, drawn by a mixture of empathy and curiosity. "You don't have to carry that alone," she said softly. "I lost my mom years ago. It leaves a hole, doesn't it?" Walter's gaze flicked to hers, a faint tremor in his stoic composure. "It does." Silence fell, thick with unspoken memories. They stood together in the dappled shade, neither quite sure how to continue. At last, Walter cleared his throat and stepped away, as though remembering who he was: hard-working rancher, man of few words, caretaker of his own solitude. "Come on," he said, voice back to its usual firm tone. "Let's go check the fences." They spent the afternoon walking the fence line, repairing minor breaks and tightening loose wires. With each task, Alicia found herself increasingly aware of Walter's presence, how his voice grew softer when he explained a technique, how his body radiated a quiet strength. A tension hummed in the air, as though they both sensed something was shifting between them, a midpoint neither could ignore. By late afternoon, they finished the last section of fencing. Alicia's shirt was soaked with sweat, her boots caked with dust. Walter slipped his gloves off and surveyed their work. "Good job," he said, meeting her eyes. "Couldn't have done it alone." She offered a tired grin. "You would have managed without me, but thanks for saying so." They headed back to the truck, neither speaking much on the ride home. But Alicia felt a stirring deep within, a realization that she'd crossed an invisible threshold. This was no longer just a matter of surviving the ranch's challenges or winning some bet. She cared about Walter, about his dreams, his burdens, and the way he navigated his lonely kingdom with such devotion. That evening, as they returned to the ranch house, Alicia went about her typical routine: shower, quick dinner, then a few minutes of quiet reflection in her room. She sat on the bed, phone in hand, debating whether to text Carmen about what was happening. What exactly is happening, she wondered. Before she could press send on a half-formed message, someone knocked lightly on her door. She opened it to find Walter standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I was thinking," he began haltingly, "we could, well, tomorrow's Sunday. Sometimes I drive over to the Watkins orchard. They have a nice spread. Let folks pick apples, feed goats. If you want, you could come with me. Might be a break from all the chores." She could barely hide her surprise. It felt like an invitation far more personal than any chore list. Her heart gave a little leap. "Yeah," she said, a bit breathless. "I'd love to." His eyes flickered with relief. "Great, we'll leave around 9. Then he offered a small nod and headed back down the hall, leaving Alicia with an unsteady pulse. Sinking onto the bed, she realized this was the moment she'd never expected, Walter willingly letting her into a part of his life outside the daily grind. It felt like a pivotal shift, a spark in the center of this dusty farmland that threatened to ignite something neither of them had planned. Midpoint of her month, perhaps, but it felt like more than that. It felt like the midpoint of two hearts colliding, forging a connection neither had seen coming, least of all Walter Cooper, the man who swore he needed no one. By the time Sunday morning arrived, Alicia could hardly contain the flutter in her chest. She'd never imagined that feeding goats and picking apples with Walter Cooper would feel like an event, but here she was, smoothing down her hair and dusting off her jeans as though she were prepping for a first date. They left the ranch later than planned, thanks to a minor crisis with a leaky water trough. Walter apologized gruffly, but Alicia assured him it was fine. Every day on the ranch brought new surprises, and she'd learned to expect the unexpected. The Watkins orchard lay about 30 minutes away, along a winding country road, lined with oak trees and rolling fields. Walter drove in thoughtful silence, occasionally glancing Alicia's way. She pretended not to notice his quick sideways looks, focusing instead on the scenery that had become both familiar and dear. When they arrived, Mr. and Mrs. Watkins greeted them like old friends. Alicia remembered meeting them at the barbecue, Mr. Watkins with his wide-brimmed straw hat and Mrs. Watkins with her warm, ever-present smile. They ushered the pair through rows of apple trees, heavy with red fruit, into a small petting area where a half-dozen goats roamed behind a rustic fence. "Oh, they're adorable," Alicia breathed, leaning over to scratch one goat's chin. It nibbled curiously at her sleeve, and she giggled, stepping back. Walter hung back, arms crossed over his chest, smiling faintly. "They can be little troublemakers. You watch, if there's a loose latch, they'll find it." A few other visitors milled around, families with young kids, an elderly couple strolling hand in hand. Alicia felt oddly self-conscious standing next to Walter, as though people might assume they too were a couple. The thought sent a pleasant but disconcerting buzz through her body. They spent the next hour picking apples, the air fragrant with sweet fruit. As Alicia reached overhead to pluck a particularly shiny apple, Walter came up beside her, steadying the branch so it wouldn't snap back. Her pulse quickened at his nearness. "Thanks," she murmured. "No problem," he replied quietly, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before he moved away. After filling a small basket, they strolled through the orchard's far end, where the Watkins kept a picnic table under a sprawling oak. Mrs. Watkins had set out a pitcher of lemonade, urging them to rest a bit. Alicia gratefully sank onto the bench, brushing stray leaves from her jeans. Walter joined her, placing the basket of apples on the table. Mrs. Watkins bustled over. "How are things, Walter? We've heard rumors of a harsh storm season coming." Walter nodded. "Yeah, the forecasts say we might get strong winds this month, maybe even tornado warnings. Got to double-check the barns, make sure everything's secure." Alicia felt a prickle of unease. She'd experienced the occasional fierce thunderstorm in the city, but the thought of tornadoes sweeping across open farmland seemed far more alarming. Mrs. Watkins patted Alicia's shoulder. "Don't fret, dear. Walter's an expert at weatherproofing. He'll keep everyone safe." Walter shifted slightly, looking more uncomfortable with praise than the talk of storms. "I'll do my best. We'll see." They finished their lemonade, then walked back to the truck with promises to return soon. Alicia placed the basket of apples in the back seat, then climbed in. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence. She felt warmth radiating from him, a subtle shift in his posture that spoke of trust. "Thanks for bringing me," she said, offering a small smile. He glanced her way, expression thoughtful. "I'm glad you came. This place reminds me that there's more to life than just day in, day out work." His words hovered in the air as he started the engine. Alicia leaned back against the seat, letting the soft hum of the truck lull her into a momentary daydream. She found herself imagining a future, not necessarily in the city, one where morning chores and orchard visits might become routine. The thought startled her, yet she couldn't ignore the tug of longing beneath it. They returned to the ranch mid-afternoon. No sooner had they stepped out of the truck than Gary jogged over, face etched with concern. "Boss, we got a problem. The new ranch hand at the neighboring farm just quit, walked off the job. Their owners are short-staffed, and they're asking if you can spare someone for a few days." Walter frowned. "They're always having staffing problems, but I'll see what I can do." He cast a hesitant glance at Alicia. She understood instantly. He needed her here, but the neighboring farm needed an extra pair of hands too. At the same time, a gnawing worry settled in her stomach. The region's upcoming storms, the ranch's normal workload, it all felt like a rising tide of demands. That evening, the mood at dinner was tense. The ranch crew discussed how to juggle extra responsibilities. Alicia quietly offered to help at the neighboring farm, but Walter shook his head. "You've come a long way, but you're still learning. I need you here, especially if the storm warnings get serious." An odd sense of relief spread through her at his words. He wanted her close, whether for practical or personal reasons. But the feeling was overshadowed by the new weight of worry in the air. It felt like the calm before a storm, both literally and metaphorically. Later, in her room, Alicia opened her laptop to check the weather forecast. Sure enough, the screen was dotted with ominous red and yellow bands predicted to strike the region next week. The ranch was more vulnerable to nature's fury than any place she'd ever lived. She closed the laptop and tried to sleep, but a restless energy kept her mind whirling. Change was in the wind. She could feel it in the orchard breeze, in Walter's quiet gestures, in the sky that seemed to churn with gathering clouds. The stakes were growing, and she suspected that soon everything, her newfound sense of belonging, the fragile bond between her and Walter, would face a critical test she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Tension gripped the ranch in the days that followed. News reports spoke of a developing weather system that could unleash tornadoes across the region. While nobody panicked outright, an undercurrent of anxiety ran through every conversation. The ranch hands worked extra hours, boarding up windows in older structures and reinforcing the barn roof. Alicia did her part, lugging heavy equipment, fetching supplies, and double-checking emergency kits. Her city upbringing had never prepared her for the possibility of tornado sirens or huddling in storm cellars. Yet she found a curious solace in the ranch's unity. Everyone pulling together, a collective resilience. Walter was everywhere at once, overseeing repairs, calling suppliers, even scouring local forecasts on his phone, although he rarely trusted them. "Storms have a mind of their own," he'd mutter. "They can shift in minutes." Alicia watched him with a mixture of concern and admiration. He carried the weight of responsibility for acres of land, livestock, and the people who relied on him. One afternoon, while she helped Marco secure loose doors on the barn, she noticed Walter in a hushed conversation with two men from the next county. Their pointed gestures and grim faces suggested something was amiss. After they left, Alicia approached Walter, wiping sweat from her brow. "Everything okay?" He hesitated, gaze clouded. "Just folks wanting to buy up farmland. They're using the storm threat as leverage, saying some ranches might not recover if the worst hits." Alarm jolted through her. "They're trying to scare you into selling?" Walter let out a humorless chuckle. "I've heard worse, but I'm not selling." She admired his resolve, but a kernel of worry took root in her chest. This land was everything to him. Could a powerful enough storm or a big enough threat really force him to let it go? That evening, Alicia found him in the stable, brushing Rosie, the pregnant mare. Quietly, she stepped beside him, resting a gentle hand on the horse's flank. "Walter," she began softly, "I know the weather is a big deal. Is there anything else bothering you?" He kept brushing, eyes focused on Rosie. "Just a lot on my plate. If the storm hits as hard as they say, there's no telling what damage we'll face. The finances could get tight. And then there's the bet." She tensed at the reminder, though she tried to keep her voice steady. "The bet with your friends. Does it really matter that much?" He paused, setting the brush down. "At first, it was just bravado. But now it feels like there's more at stake. My friends are watching, the town's whispering, and I've got a reputation as the man who can make anything flourish here, including you." She raised her eyebrows, cheeks flushing. "I'm not just a project, Walter." His gaze snapped to hers, conflicted. "I know that," he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I never intended to treat you like one. But that's how it started, and I'm not good at changing course." A jolt of hurt and anger mingled in her chest. She turned to leave, but he gently touched her arm. "Alicia." She hesitated, wanting to pull away, yet a part of her longed to stay. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I never expected you to become—" He broke off, and she saw genuine turmoil in his eyes. "You're not what I expected." Her breath caught. She felt the strain of unspoken emotion, a storm of a different kind. But before either could say more, a flash of lightning lit up the sky outside the stable window. A rumble of thunder followed, distant yet menacing. Rosie shifted nervously, stamping her hooves. Walter placed a calming hand on the horse. "We should get inside." "That storm might hit sooner than we thought." Alicia nodded, heart pounding. Some storms brewed in the sky, others brewed between people, and both could be equally frightening. They rushed out into a sudden downpour, securing stable doors and leading the most vulnerable animals to safer enclosures. Rain drenched them within seconds, turning the ground to mud. Wind whipped Alicia's hair, making it tough to see. She could hear Walter shouting instructions, flashes of lightning illuminating his determined face. By the time they dashed into the house, water dripped from their clothes onto the hardwood floor. Gary and Marco followed soon after, soaked and panting. The thunder boomed overhead. While it wasn't yet a full-blown tornado, the storm raged fiercely enough to rattle the windows. Huddling in the living room, they listened to weather reports and scanned local alerts. The sirens didn't go off, but the wind howled outside, testing their fortifications. For over an hour, they waited, tensions strung tight as wire. Finally, the worst passed, leaving only a steady rain. When Alicia peered out the window, she saw a few broken tree limbs, but the structures appeared intact. Relief flooded her. Walter exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging. He caught her gaze in the dim lamplight. For a moment, neither spoke. The unspoken connection between them loomed large, and so did the uncertainties swirling around them. "Storm's eased," Gary said, flipping off the TV. "We should check the property at first light. No sense stumbling around in mud and darkness." As everyone trudged to change out of wet clothes, Alicia retreated to her room, heart heavy with unresolved questions. The storm outside had diminished, but inside, her emotions swirled. Anger at being someone's bet, confusion over Walter's sincerity, worry over the future of the ranch. Bad omens indeed. She sensed that more challenges lay ahead, ones that might shake loose every fragile bond she'd begun to form in this place she was starting to call home. At sunrise, Alicia and the ranch hands surveyed the aftermath. Broken branches littered the property, puddles pockmarked the fields, and a section of fencing near the chicken coop had toppled. Still, the damage was far less severe than it could have been. "This fence can be patched up quickly," Gary announced, relief evident in his voice. "Glad we reinforced it last week." Walter nodded, rolling his shoulders. "We'll fix it today. Alicia, you go with Marco to check the fields. Make sure none of the crops are flooded." She grabbed her boots, still caked with mud from last night, and followed Marco out. The air was cooler, fresh with that post-storm clarity. Yet a tightness lingered in her chest, the memory of her conversation with Walter in the stable echoing in her mind. Marco whistled low when they reached the fields. Several rows of lettuce and tomatoes had been flattened by the wind, and muddy water glistened in the furrows. "That's a shame," Alicia murmured, kneeling to inspect the leaves. "Some of these might recover, right?" Marco shrugged. "Hard to say. We'll salvage what we can. Worst case, we'll replant." They worked methodically, propping up stakes, clearing debris, scooping out excess water. Alicia poured her frustration into the labor, welcoming the physical exertion that forced her mind to quiet. By mid-morning, she was soaked in sweat, hair plastered to her forehead. But the sense of accomplishment, even amid ruin, buoyed her spirit. This was the ranch way. Face adversity head-on. At lunchtime, she trudged back to the house. The living room bustled with voices. Walter had apparently invited a few neighbors to help fix fences, and the place buzzed with new energy. Determined to be useful, Alicia prepared sandwiches, distributing them among the crew. At one point, she crossed paths with Walter in the hallway. He paused, removing his hat. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," she replied, juggling a plate of sandwiches. His gaze flicked to the food, then back to her face. "Thank you for all you're doing." She nodded, but before she could respond, one of Walter's neighbors, an older man named Clay, stepped in with a question about the fence. Just like that, the moment dissolved. Alicia turned away, uncertain whether she felt relieved or disappointed. The afternoon brought more work. Alicia joined Gary in repairing the collapsed fence boards behind the chicken coop. Sweat trickled down her temple as she hammered nails into fresh wood. "So," Gary said casually, "you and the boss doing okay?" She winced, nearly hitting her thumb. "Why do you ask?" Gary shrugged. "He's been quiet." "Well, quieter than usual. Figured something might be up." Alicia debated how much to share. Gary was friendly but also a longtime confidant of Walter. Finally, she sighed. I found out about the bet, how I'm basically part of it. Didn't exactly feel great. Gary lowered his voice, leaning in. Listen, Walter's a stubborn fella, but I can tell he's grown to care for you. We all see it. The bet might have been the excuse, but I don't think that's what's driving him now. Her heart pounded. I'm not sure how to believe that. He barely talks about his feelings. Gary laughed. He never does, but trust me, actions speak for themselves. They worked until dusk, the fence finally restored. By the time they'd packed up tools, Alicia's arms trembled with exhaustion. She made her way back to the house, longing for a shower and a moment of calm. Inside, she found a small note pinned to the fridge. Alicia, I'm driving into town to pick up more materials. Back soon. Walter. A flicker of disappointment stirred in her stomach. She wasn't sure why. Perhaps she'd hoped they could talk today, clear the air. Instead, she grabbed a quick snack and headed upstairs, intending to wash away the grime of the day. When she emerged from the shower, her phone buzzed with a call from Carmen. Hey, stranger, Carmen greeted cheerily. How's life on the ranch? Alicia sank onto the bed, hair damp, a hint of longing in her voice. Complicated. There was a big storm, some damage, and I found out that my presence here was basically a bet, though I guess I knew that. Carmen sighed. Right, that bet. Did he ever admit he's falling for you? Alicia laughed without humor. Falling for me? More like he's wrestling with guilt or pride. I can't tell. They talked for a while, Carmen offering encouragement. By the time Alicia hung up, dusk had settled, and Walter still hadn't returned. Anxiety gnawed at her. She paced the living room, eyeing the clock. Eventually, headlights lit the driveway. Alicia went outside to find Walter stepping out of his truck, looking drained but relieved. Sorry it took so long, he said, hauling a box of supplies. Had to stop by 2 different stores. She stepped closer, her heart pounding. I was worried. He offered a weary half-smile. No need, I can take care of myself. They carried the supplies inside, setting them down in the kitchen. The silence between them felt thick. Alicia mustered her courage, blurting, Walter, can we talk? He set a tool bag on the counter, eyes flicking up to hers. Sure. She inhaled, steadying herself. About us, about why I'm really here. He looked torn, like he wanted to bolt but forced himself to stay. I know we need to. Let's go sit. They moved to the living room, where the old couch creaked under their weight. Outside, the wind picked up again, rustling the trees. Alicia folded her hands in her lap, voice trembling slightly. I'm trying to figure out what's real and what's just part of some deal you made with your friends. Walter's jaw tightened. It started that way, I won't lie, but it changed. You've changed me, Alicia. This ranch has felt more alive since you got here. Emotions surged within her. She wanted to believe him, to trust the warmth in his eyes. But doubt still lingered, like a stubborn storm cloud refusing to blow away. And as they sat there, teetering between confession and conflict, Alicia sensed that the toughest choices had yet to be made. Alicia and Walter continued their halting conversation long after the sun had fully set, the dim light of a single lamp casting soft shadows on the living room walls. Outside, the wind rattled tree branches, an unsettling chorus mirroring her own inner turmoil. So, Alicia ventured, voice barely above a whisper, you're saying you didn't expect me to become important to you? Walter exhaled, his gaze dropping to the floor. I didn't. It was supposed to be a month-long arrangement, a way to prove a point. But you're not just a point to prove. Her heart twisted painfully. She'd dreamed of hearing those words, some acknowledgement that she was more than a bet. Yet a part of her still chafed at how it all began. It hurts, she admitted, swallowing hard. "Knowing I was brought here on a dare." Walter rubbed the back of his neck, clearly grappling with guilt. "I can't change that. All I can say is I'm sorry. I see you, Alicia, your drive, your heart. You've made this ranch feel less empty." His words struck something deep within her. She wanted to close the distance between them, to accept the apology, to trust the sincerity in his voice. But weeks of confusion and the fear of heartbreak held her back. Suddenly, the front door burst open. Gary rushed in, eyes wild. "Boss!" A twister touched down 3 counties over. The radio said conditions could spawn more. "We gotta be on alert." Walter shot to his feet. "Everybody in the shelter." Gary nodded. "Marco's guiding them now." Without hesitation, Alicia and Walter followed him outside. The night sky churned with ominous clouds, lightning flickering on the horizon. Ranch hands and a few neighbors gathered by the storm cellar near the barn, flashlights slicing through the darkness. As Alicia descended the cellar steps, fear coiled in her gut. Thunder boomed in the distance, each rumble resonating in her chest. The shelter was a concrete bunker, stocked with basic supplies and dim overhead lights running off a generator. Children clung to their parents. Older ranchers sat in tense silence. Walter and Gary carried in extra lanterns, securing the heavy steel door behind them. The cramped space smelled of damp earth and anxiety. Alicia found a spot against the wall, hugging her knees. Walter moved among the group, checking in, ensuring no one was missing. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Some tried to pass the hours with small talk, but mostly the shelter buzzed with uneasy quiet. Alicia caught Walter's eye across the room, a distant flash of lightning illuminating his face through the narrow ventilation window. In that moment, all the doubts about their relationship seemed secondary to sheer survival. A ranch hand fiddled with a battery-powered radio, static filling the air, before a faint voice broke through. Severe thunderstorm warnings in effect. Potential tornado sightings. Residents advised to seek shelter. Alicia's heart pounded. She'd never experienced this level of raw, unpredictable nature. Walter sank onto an upturned crate beside her. The closeness of his presence was a fragile comfort. "You okay?" he murmured. She nodded, though her throat felt tight. "Yeah, this is just intense." He clasped his hands, leaning forward. "This ranch, everything I have, can be wiped out in minutes by a tornado. It's a risk we live with." Her fingers trembled as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I can't imagine the stress you carry." He stared at the concrete floor. "I've always believed if I worked hard enough, I could control any outcome. But storms don't care about control." A wave of empathy swept through her. She reached out, hesitated, then gently laid a hand on his arm. He looked at her, eyes reflecting both gratitude and a hint of vulnerability. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "we're in this together." A faint smile flickered across his lips. "I appreciate that." Suddenly, the wind outside roared, the shelter door rattling. Gasps rippled through the group. In the corner, a young girl burst into tears, her mother rubbing her back in trembling reassurance. Everyone held their breath, the howling gale drowning out rational thought. Alicia clenched her jaw, bracing for an impact that, mercifully, didn't come. After what felt like hours, the wind receded to a distant rumble. The radio crackled again. "Tornado has lifted. Heavy rain continuing. Remain in shelter until further notice." A collective sigh of relief spread through the cellar. Some ranch hands offered hushed prayers of thanks. Alicia realized her nails had left tiny crescent marks in her palms from clenching her fists so tightly. She looked at Walter, whose gaze remained steeled, as though he expected another blow. Minutes turned into an hour before they ventured cautiously outside. The air smelled of rain and churned earth, but the immediate threat had passed. Flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing fallen branches, scattered debris, but no catastrophic damage. Alicia exhaled a shaky breath. The ranch still stood. She felt a swirling sense of gratitude, along with a fresh wave of uncertainty about how close they'd come to disaster. As the group dispersed, heading to inspect various corners of the property, Walter and Alicia found themselves near the barn. Shadows clung to every post, the muddy ground squelching underfoot. Walter turned to her, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. Storms are part of life here. Doesn't make it easier." She forced a small smile, hugging her arms. "This whole experience is teaching me just how fragile everything is." He studied her intently. "I don't want you to feel trapped or obligated to stay, especially if—" She shook her head, stopping him. "Walter, I'm here because I want to be. But we both know we need to figure out where we stand. Not tonight. We're exhausted. But soon." He nodded, relief and apprehension mingling on his face. "Soon," he echoed. That night, Alicia crawled into bed while the wind still hissed through the eaves, her mind tangled with images of swirling clouds and Walter's guarded expression. The storm had spared them, for now. Yet the biggest questions hovered, unanswered, as dark and unpredictable as the next front rolling in. Dawn broke clear and golden, a startling contrast to the frantic hours spent in the storm cellar. Alicia woke to the scent of wet grass and the distant crow of a rooster. She stretched her stiff muscles, still wearing the clothes she'd thrown on when the tornado threat loomed. Outside her window, puddles glistened, but the ranch seemed miraculously intact. Downstairs, she found Walter sipping coffee at the kitchen table, dark circles under his eyes betraying a night of poor sleep. He glanced up with a fatigued smile. "Morning." "Morning," she replied, taking the seat across from him. "How's everything?" He shrugged, exhaustion dulling his usual brisk tone. "No major damage, just debris cleanup, maybe a few repairs." They sat in a tense silence for a moment, both remembering the conversation they'd left unfinished. Alicia forced herself to speak first. "Last night was scary, but it also put things in perspective. I realize life is too short for half-truths and what-ifs." Walter set his coffee mug down, eyes heavy with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. "Agreed." She inhaled a steadying breath. "I'm not naive. I know how this started. But I also know what I've felt these past weeks. I care about you, more than I ever expected to care about anyone out here." A faint flush crept up Walter's neck. He seemed torn, fighting against the natural impulse to hide behind his stoic walls. "I've never been good at saying what I feel. Even with my dad, I could barely express myself. But you've made me want to try." A flicker of hope warmed her chest. This was the honesty she'd craved. "So, where does that leave us?" He looked at her intently, the early light illuminating the tension in his features. "It leaves us at a crossroads, Alicia. You were supposed to be here for a month. That month's not over yet, but I can't pretend I'm just fulfilling a bet anymore. I want you to stay. Past the bet. I mean..." Her heart thudded with a mix of exhilaration and fear. "Walter, I have a life back in the city, well, kind of. I don't have a great job, but I do have bills, responsibilities. My roommate, Carmen..." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I get it. I know it's not as simple as just deciding to live on a ranch. But I had to tell you how I feel." Emotion thickened in her throat. She reached across the table, lacing her fingers through his. His hand was warm, calloused, reassuring. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't have all the answers either, but I'm willing to see where this goes." They shared a tender moment, broken only by the sound of Gary stepping into the kitchen. He froze, noticing their clasped hands. A slow grin spread on his face. "Oh, sorry, boss. I was just checking if we're doing the fence cleanup this morning or—" Walter cleared his throat, reluctantly letting go of Alicia's hand. "Yes, let's get started." Gary grabbed a coffee to go and winked at Alicia on his way out. She flushed, but the subtle thrill in her chest remained. Something had shifted, no more dancing around their feelings. Still, the day's chores demanded attention. Hours later, Alicia found herself dragging broken branches into a pile, while Walter repaired a small section of gutter ripped loose by the storm. The ranch bustled with purposeful activity, everyone eager to restore normalcy. Despite her tired muscles, Alicia felt lighter. Every so often, she caught Walter's eye across the yard, and they'd exchange a subtle, knowing smile. By mid-afternoon, the ranch hands took a break in the shade of a large oak, sipping ice water and wiping sweat from their brows. Conversation drifted from the weather to crops, to what local events might be happening in the coming weeks. "County fairs next month," Marco mentioned, leaning against the tree trunk. "Think we'll have time to participate, boss?" Walter shrugged. "Depends on how busy we are. Might be nice to show off some livestock." Alicia perked up. "A county fair? That sounds like so much fun." She pictured carnival rides, funnel cake, maybe even a pie baking contest. Gary grinned, throwing her a conspiratorial look. "You ever judge a hog competition before, city girl?" She burst out laughing. "Definitely not, but I'm open to new experiences." Walter couldn't resist a smile. "We'll see about that. Once the farm's in order." Their break ended as quickly as it began, and everyone returned to work. That sense of camaraderie and shared purpose buoyed Alicia through the rest of the day. She felt part of something bigger than herself, a community woven together by the land and its hardships. At sunset, as the sky blazed pink and orange, Alicia walked along the fence line with Walter, double-checking the boards they'd repaired. The field shimmered under the waning light, the air finally cooling. Walter paused, his gaze sweeping over the property. "Whenever I look at this place, I think of my father. He poured everything into these fields." Alicia slipped her hand into his, heart warming at the trust he was offering. "You've honored him every day by keeping this ranch going." He turned, eyes meeting hers. "I couldn't have done it without good people by my side. And you've made me realize I might want more than just the ranch." She leaned her head against his shoulder, comforted by his solidity. "I want to be here with you, Walter," she admitted softly. "But I need to figure out the logistics, my life back in the city." His arm encircled her waist. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." They lingered there, two silhouettes against a fiery sky, standing at a crossroad of possibilities. The bet still existed, but it had become so small compared to the sweeping power of what they were beginning to build together. Night descended, and with it, an unspoken promise. Tomorrow and the days after would bring new challenges, storms, financial pressures. The question of whether Alicia truly belonged here long-term. But for now, as the last ribbons of sunlight faded, they found solace in each other's presence, hopeful that whatever decisions lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The day after their heartfelt talk at sunrise, Alicia woke with a renewed sense of purpose. She might not have every answer, but she knew she wanted to stay by Walter's side for as long as it made sense, for both of them. Her plan was to call Carmen later and discuss the practicalities. Maybe subletting her portion of the city apartment, or taking a leave of absence from job hunting. It felt like a big leap, but her heart urged her forward. Downstairs, Walter was already finishing breakfast with Gary and Marco. They all looked up when she entered, tension flickering in their expressions, as though something was amiss. "Alicia," Walter said, gesturing for her to join them. "Gary got a call from the bank this morning. Seems they want to schedule an urgent meeting with me." She blinked, confusion turning to worry. "What for?" Walter sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "We took out a sizable loan a while back to expand the ranch. The banks never had concerns before, but now, after hearing about the recent storms and possible crop losses, they want to reassess the ranch's financial health. If they decide we're too risky—" He let the words hang, but Alicia understood perfectly. They could lose important lines of credit, maybe be forced to downsize. It was a gut punch at a time when everything else seemed finally to be coming together. "We'll figure it out," she said softly, placing a reassuring hand on Walter's shoulder. "You've weathered so much already." He offered a tight nod, though his eyes held a storm of worry. "I'll head into town tomorrow to meet with the bank manager. Meantime, we need to show strong numbers, healthy livestock, stable crops, well-kept facilities. If they do a walkthrough, I want everything in top shape." Gary cleared his throat. "Boss, how about we speed up the next harvest check on the fields we can salvage? Maybe we can demonstrate the yield potential." Walter agreed, and within minutes, the entire crew had a plan. A rigorous inspection of each pasture and crop plot, a full tally of livestock conditions, plus extra time devoted to repairs and cleanup, so the ranch looked its best. Alicia threw herself into the work, determined to help Walter face whatever financial scrutiny lay ahead. She joined Marco in the garden, carefully documenting which plants had survived the storm. Although it was back-breaking labor to walk row after row under the glaring sun, she approached the task with fierce determination. Every note she took felt like a small shield against the uncertainty looming over Walter. By mid-afternoon, they'd compiled enough data to suggest that the ranch, while strained, was still viable. Alicia glanced at the numbers on the clipboard. "We actually have more surviving crops than I expected," she said, offering Marco a hopeful smile. He nodded. "We'll need to replant some sections, but we're not starting from zero." When they finally returned to the house, Alicia found Walter standing on the porch, gazing out at the fields with a distant expression. She climbed the steps quietly and stood beside him, letting the soft evening breeze ruffle her hair. "Hey," she said, "we've got the harvest report." "It's not all bad news." He turned, one corner of his mouth lifting. "That's something, at least." Alicia reached out and lightly touched his arm. "I can see how much this place means to you. We'll do whatever it takes to keep it going, right?" Walter's posture eased, the tension in his shoulders softening. "Right," he agreed, gently placing his hand over hers. For a moment, he let himself relax into the comfort of her presence. Later that evening, Gary, Marco, and a few other hands gathered around the dining table to discuss final preparations for the bank's visit. The conversation was mostly logistical: who would handle the cattle count, who would tidy up the barn, who would supervise the orchard. Alicia noticed Walter tapping his foot anxiously, glancing at the clock every so often, as though his mind were racing well beyond the room. When the meeting ended, Alicia lingered behind. She found Walter in the kitchen, rinsing dishes with mechanical precision. "Walter," she began, "about tomorrow. Don't go in there thinking you're alone. You've got your crew, and you've got me." He dried his hands and turned to face her, his gaze weary. "I appreciate it, but the truth is, if they decide we're too high risk, they'll freeze our credit or demand immediate payments we can't make. The folks at the bank just see numbers, not the blood and sweat poured into this land." Alicia felt a surge of protectiveness on his behalf. "Then let's show them more than numbers. Show them a ranch that's thriving, a community pulling together. Sometimes that matters more than they realize." Walter stared at her for a long moment, conflict and gratitude shining in his eyes. "You make me believe it's possible," he finally said, voice quiet yet sincere. She stepped closer, heart fluttering. It felt like a fragile, intimate moment, one that spoke of shared battles and a mutual need for hope. Before either could say more, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, drawing their attention. "Another storm?" Alicia asked, her brow furrowing. Walter shook his head. "Might just be a passing shower. Let's hope it doesn't add more pressure to tomorrow." Nodding, Alicia exhaled, tension coiling in her stomach. Storms, banks, old bets, everything seemed to close in, yet beneath it all, she felt a growing certainty that she wanted to stand by Walter, come what may. She headed to her room with tired limbs and a whirring mind. As she lay in bed, a single thought kept replaying. They were on the brink of something, success or disaster, heartbreak or triumph, and only time would reveal which direction their world would tilt. The next morning, Walter drove into town before sunrise, determined to have time to review all the documents before meeting the bank manager. Alicia wanted to accompany him, but he insisted on going alone, claiming the ranch needed her to handle any emergencies. "I'll keep in touch," he promised, pressing the truck keys between anxious fingers. "If all goes well, I'll be back by lunchtime." Alicia stood on the porch, watching dust swirl beneath the tires as he disappeared down the long gravel road. Gary approached quietly from behind. "We'll hold down the fort, Alicia. Don't worry." She nodded, forcing a smile. "I know." For the next few hours, she immersed herself in tasks, feeding horses, cleaning the coop, double-checking the orchard, anything to keep her mind occupied. Yet worry gnawed at her. The ranch hands seemed equally on edge, glancing toward the road as though expecting to see Walter's truck crest the hill at any moment. By noon, he still hadn't returned. Meanwhile, a sleek black SUV pulled onto the property. Alicia squinted in the midday sun as a tall, sharp-dressed man stepped out. Behind him stood a companion with a clipboard and an assessing gaze. "Hello?" the first man called, his tone polite but businesslike. "Name's Daniel Reeves. I represent a company interested in buying farmland in this region." His eyes flicked over the buildings, the fields, the orchard. Alicia's guard went up immediately. "Walter Cooper isn't here, and I doubt he's interested in selling." Reeves exchanged a look with his colleague. "Is he the ranch owner?" When Alicia nodded, he continued, "I left messages but never received a call back. We're making very generous offers to properties affected by recent storms. We can help owners avoid the risk of loan defaults." A chill prickled Alicia's spine. This was a vulture swooping in, hoping the storms had weakened the ranch enough to force a sale. She squared her shoulders. "Walter isn't selling. You're welcome to leave your card." Reeves offered a slick smile. "We understand how personal this can be, but you might be surprised at how appealing our terms are." He handed her a business card, the expensive gold lettering catching the sun. Before Alicia could reply, Gary and Marco approached, their expressions grim. Clearly, they recognized what was happening. Marco crossed his arms. "We don't need outside buyers. Walter's handled worse storms." Reeves gave a slight shrug, unruffled by the hostility. "Very well, but do let Mr. Cooper know we stopped by. We'll be in the area. And we're always willing to negotiate." With that, he and his associate climbed back into the SUV and disappeared in a cloud of dust. Alicia stared at the card in her hand, anger burning in her chest. Always willing to negotiate indeed. They were circling like sharks. Gary spoke up. "Boss will want to know about this." "Definitely," Alicia muttered, stuffing the card into her pocket. It was another hour before Walter's truck finally appeared. He parked near the house, stepping out with fatigue weighing on his broad shoulders. Alicia hurried to meet him, searching his face for clues. "Well?" she asked softly, wringing her hands. Walter dragged in a breath. "They're not cutting us off. Yet, the bank manager wants updated financial statements, monthly budgets, proof we can meet our next interest payment. He gave us a deadline of 2 weeks to submit everything." "That's not terrible," she ventured. He gave a short nod, expression grim. "Could be worse, I guess, but we'll need to tighten our belts. No major expansions, no big purchases. We have to prove the ranch can handle any losses from the storms." Alicia hesitated, glancing around to ensure no ranch hands lingered. "A man named Reeves stopped by, representing some buying group. They think we might be in trouble." Walter's jaw clenched. "Vultures. They've approached other farms in the area, too. Trying to prey on fear and debt." She drew the business card from her pocket, handing it over. "Said he'd make a generous offer." Walter stared at the card like it was a venomous snake. Then, with a low scoff, he ripped it in half. The pieces fluttered to the ground. "They can keep their offers," he said coldly. "As long as I have breath in my body, this ranch isn't for sale." Alicia admired his resolve, yet worry still gnawed at her. She wanted to believe in his unwavering determination, but a voice in her mind whispered about the harsh realities of finances. They walked to the porch, where Gary gave Walter an update on chores completed and repairs scheduled. After a few words of thanks, Walter sank onto the porch swing. Alicia settled beside him, resting a gentle hand on his knee. "I'll help however I can," she said. "If that means more chores, more hours, or even staying beyond the month to keep things going, I'm here." His gaze softened. "You've already done more than enough." They rocked in silence for a moment, the chains creaking softly. The midday sun cast long shadows across the yard, as though foreshadowing the challenges yet to come. Alicia found herself fighting an odd mix of fear and hope. The ranch faced real danger, but Walter was standing firm. And she wasn't about to abandon him. Just then, a breeze rustled the trees, carrying the scent of fresh hay. Alicia inhaled deeply. She pictured the orchard, the fields, the horses, the orchard goats, and the makeshift dance floor from that night of barbecue and music. This ranch was more than just land. It was home to a man whose guarded heart she was coming to cherish, and she would fight for it, for him, whatever that entailed. Walter stood, determined once more. "We'll get through this," he murmured, eyes fixed on the fields. "I won't let them take everything I've built." And as Alicia followed his gaze, she silently vowed the same. Over the next several days, the ranch pulsated with renewed urgency. Alicia pitched in wherever she could, helping Marco document every square foot of land that remained productive, double-checking livestock health records, and even assisting Gary with a more detailed inventory of ranch equipment. Each new spreadsheet or folder felt like another brick in the wall they were building against financial uncertainty. Sometimes she'd find Walter poring over loan documents late into the night, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. She tried to coax him into bed, reminding him that a clear mind would serve them better than all-nighters. He'd usually relent with a weary nod, but she suspected he burned the midnight oil more often than not. Beyond the ranch's daily hustle, Alicia also made time to video call Carmen. Sitting in the farmhouse's modest living room, she updated her friend on the rising pressures. Carmen's eyes shone with excitement and concern in equal measure. "So, you're seriously considering staying there long-term?" Carmen asked, voice crackling through the spotty internet connection. Alicia sighed, hugging a cushion. "Yes. I mean, I feel like I belong here. Walter and I, we're connected in a way I never expected, but the ranch is in a precarious spot. Carmen offered a sympathetic smile. I'm rooting for you, city girl. Just promise you'll visit at Thanksgiving or Christmas. Okay? Alicia laughed softly. Deal. But for now, I've got to help keep this place afloat. When the call ended, Alicia leaned back, letting the reality sink in. She was on the verge of uprooting her entire life for a man she'd only known a few weeks, for a ranch that was fighting to survive. Yet strangely, it felt more right than anything she'd done in years. Later that afternoon, Walter gathered everyone in the barn for a status meeting. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, illuminating motes of hay dust in the air. All right, he began, arms folded. We have just under 2 weeks to submit everything to the bank. Marco, how's the orchard report coming? Marco adjusted his cap. We finalized the count of healthy trees and potential yield. I'll add the last storm's damage report. Then it's good to go. Walter nodded. Gary, equipment list. Gary patted a clipboard. Updated. Even included the repairs we plan to make next month. Should show the bank we're proactive. Walter turned to Alicia. And you? She held up a sheaf of papers. Livestock records, birth rates, vet checkups, feed costs. I compiled everything we had on file, organized and labeled. A flicker of appreciation warmed Walter's gaze. Excellent. Let's aim to finalize all documents by the end of the week. Before anyone could disperse, they heard a car engine outside. Soon, the barn door swung open, revealing none other than Daniel Reeves, the corporate buyer who'd visited days ago. A polite smile curved his lips, though it didn't reach his calculating eyes. Sorry to interrupt, Reeves said, stepping inside. He wore pressed slacks and a crisp shirt, an odd sight amid dusty overalls and boots. I wanted to check if Mr. Cooper had reconsidered our offer. Walter's posture stiffened. No, I haven't. Reeves's gaze flicked across the group, Gary and Marco glaring, Alicia standing protectively close to Walter. I see the ranch is pulling together all its data. That's admirable, he commented, gesturing at the documents Alicia held. But sometimes, the numbers just don't add up. Alicia bristled, but Walter answered first, voice low. Get to the point. Reeves straightened, slipping a glossy folder from under his arm. My company is prepared to offer a price that could settle your loans immediately. You'd walk away with a profit, free of debt, and no risk of future storm damage. If you hold out and the bank gets uneasy, you might lose everything. A tense silence filled the barn. Alicia's stomach churned. It was a devil's bargain, security at the cost of abandoning the ranch. Walter inhaled slowly. This ranch is my home, my legacy. I'm not selling. Reeves feigned disappointment. A pity. We'll be in touch, in case you change your mind. He handed Walter the folder anyway, then turned on his heel. As he walked out, Alicia could feel the anger radiating from Walter beside her. Gary muttered under his breath, fists clenched. Marco shook his head, eyes dark. When Reeves was gone, Walter tossed the folder onto a nearby workbench. Unbelievable. Alicia placed a gentle hand on his back. He's trying to pressure you. He knows the bank is watching. Walter nodded, jaw tight. They're exploiting fear, but I won't let them. Gary exhaled, tension evident in his voice. We'll fight, boss. This is our home too. That collective resolve shone in each person's face. Reeves might have money and corporate backing, but the ranch had loyalty, history, and heart. Alicia's own determination flared, certain now that these people were not just colleagues, but a family, one she wanted to be part of. Walter looked around, shoulders squaring. Let's double down. We've come this far. I'm not losing what my father and I built. He strode out of the barn, folder abandoned. Alicia followed, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Outside, the sun blazed overhead, the fields stretching into the horizon, a testament to all the sweat and sacrifice poured into them. In that moment, Alicia realized the fight was bigger than just finances or storms. It was about preserving a way of life, a deep connection to the land and to each other, ties that bound them in ways city living had never made her feel. And for Walter, it was about defending the only home he'd ever known. With the day's chores still ahead, they dispersed. But Alicia felt the weight of the confrontation linger, a promise of greater trials on the horizon. The storms might have subsided for now, but another tempest was gathering, one that threatened to shake the ranch to its core. The final week before the bank's submission deadline arrived in a flurry of late-night accounting sessions and daytime hustle. Alicia barely recognized the person she'd been in the city. Here, she found herself staying up past midnight to format spreadsheets, cross-check receipts, and even watch YouTube tutorials on ranch financial management just to help Walter. Stress lines etched deeper into Walter's face each day. He met with a local accountant recommended by Gary, hoping a professional stamp of approval on their documents might sway the bank. Though the accountant was thorough, she hinted that the ranch's margins were razor-thin, especially after the storms. On a cool, clear afternoon, Alicia was in the barn, finishing a routine check on Rosie the broodmare, whose foaling time approached. The horse nickered gently, her belly large. Alicia stroked her neck, whispering soft reassurances. Taking care of Rosie offered a soothing respite from financial nightmares. At least here, she could nurture life. Suddenly, Walter appeared in the stable doorway, face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. "Alicia," he said, voice tight, "come with me." Her heart lurched. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer, just led her out toward the main house where Gary and Marco were already gathered by the porch. Gary held a letter, his grip so tight the paper crinkled at the edges. Marco's usual easygoing demeanor was replaced by alarm. Wordlessly, Gary extended the letter to Alicia. She scanned it, a formal notice from the bank, referencing a concern over collateral values and stating that the ranch's credit line would be suspended unless they provided additional security. They had only 3 days to comply or risk default. Walter's voice cracked. 3 days! They gave us 2 weeks. Now it's 3 days. Gary raked a hand through his hair. They must be spooked by the corporate buyers circling like vultures. The bank's pushing you to sell or produce money up front. Alicia's stomach twisted. This was worse than they'd feared. Is there anything else we can do? Marco set his jaw. We could try a private loan, but that's risky and might not come in time. Or see if there's any government assistance for storm damage. Walter shook his head in disbelief. Even if we applied for aid, that's a lengthy process. We're out of time. A heavy silence fell. This was the dreaded moment, the day it felt like everything might crumble. Alicia reached for Walter's hand, but he stepped back, eyes burning with frustration. "Everyone, back to work," he ordered tersely. "We can't quit until the last second." Gary and Marco exchanged worried glances but obeyed. Alicia watched them go, then turned to Walter. "Hey," she murmured, "we'll find a way." He faced her, pain etched into every line of his face. "What if we don't?" "I can't lose this ranch, Alicia. It's all I have left of my dad, of who I am." She moved closer, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "You have me," she said softly. "You have Gary, Marco, the community. We'll stand by you." His expression flickered with gratitude, then quickly hardened. "Standing by me isn't going to magically free up capital or change the bank's mind." The harshness in his voice stung, but Alicia refused to let it drive her away. "Walter, we're in this together." He exhaled, looking away. "I'm sorry. I know you're trying to help. This is the all is lost moment, right? When everything hangs by a thread." His words echoed a deep resignation. Alicia swallowed hard, feeling her own tears threaten to spill. She'd never seen him so defeated. There has to be something else. A loan from friends. A fundraiser. We can't give up. He closed his eyes, shoulders sagging. I appreciate your optimism, but time is our enemy. If we don't come up with more security, the bank forecloses. We'd lose everything, even if we fight, the legal fees alone. A sound of frustration escaped her lips. No, I won't accept that. Let me talk to Carmen. Maybe she knows people who invest or something. I'll try anything. Walter's gaze softened, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. For a long moment, they stood there, hearts pounding in unison. Alicia felt his desperation, his heartbreak, and wished she could mend it with sheer will. I'm sorry, he murmured against her hair. I dragged you into this mess. She shook her head, blinking back tears. No, I chose to be here. I love this ranch. She stopped short, the word love hanging in the air, trembling with significance. Walter froze, breath hitching. She stepped back, searching his face. Before either could speak, the rumble of an approaching vehicle broke the moment. A battered old pickup rolled onto the property, and out stepped Clay, one of Walter's neighbors. He jogged over, face tight with urgency. Walter, I heard the bank's pushing you up against the wall. Listen, we got a group of local ranchers who might be willing to chip in, help secure your loan. They're calling an emergency meeting tonight at the community hall. You need to come. Walter stiffened with surprise. They're offering to help me, Clay shrugged. We look after our own. I won't lie. It might not be enough, but at least hear us out. Alicia turned to Walter, eyes brimming with hope. This could be it. A chance. He swallowed, overwhelmed. Yeah, let's go. As Clay hurried back to his truck, Alicia squeezed Walter's hand, a spark of determination rekindling. Perhaps all wasn't lost. Not yet. But the next few hours would be critical. A final rally in the face of looming defeat. She followed Walter into the house, hearts thudding in unison. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, whether it meant triumph or the heartbreaking end of everything he held dear. That evening, the community hall buzzed with voices, the scent of strong coffee and sawdust in the air. Dozens of local ranchers, farmers and their families crowded into folding chairs arranged in a circle. Walter and Alicia slipped in quietly, finding seats next to Clay. Gary and Marco followed, standing toward the back with a few other ranch hands. An older woman named Ruth, known for her tough-as-nails demeanor, took center stage. She pushed a pair of thick glasses up her nose and cleared her throat. We all know why we're here. Walter Cooper's ranch is in trouble. Bank's pressuring him something fierce. But this meeting ain't just about Walter. It's about any one of us who could be next if we don't stand together. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Ruth gestured to a makeshift whiteboard, covered with numbers and potential donation pledges. We've pooled what we can so far. If Walter needs to show the bank he has additional support, we're aiming to get him enough capital to ease that pressure. Walter rose, jaw tight. Ruth, I don't know how to thank you, but let's be realistic. My debts might exceed what folks can afford. Ruth nodded, face stern. Then let's see how close we can get. If we're short, we'll figure out the next step. One by one, local ranchers stood to announce contributions. Some offered a few $100s, others pledged farm equipment or feed. A retired couple promised to co-sign a small loan. The amounts varied, but the spirit was the same, a community rallying to save one of its own. Alicia felt tears prickle at her eyes. She clasped Walter's hand, heart aching at the generosity filling the room. Yet she sensed his unease, the guilt of accepting help he could never fully repay. After nearly an hour of back and forth, Ruth tallied the pledges. We're close, but not quite there, she announced, pursing her lips. We need another 5-figure sum to hit the threshold the bank's likely expecting. Uneasy silence fell. Ranchers whispered among themselves. Alicia's chest tightened. Was this the breaking point? Then, to everyone's surprise, the hall's back door squeaked open, and Daniel Reeves stepped in, still dressed in his immaculate business attire. Conversations died instantly, tension crackling. Walter's posture stiffened, and Gary shot a furious glare. Ruth's mouth thinned. "What do you want, Reeves?" He raised his hands defensively. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I heard about this meeting and wanted to present an alternative solution." Walter clenched his fists. "We already know your solution. Buy out the ranch. Not happening." Reeves cleared his throat. "It doesn't have to be a full buyout. My company is prepared to offer a partial stake, an investment. Cooper Ranch remains under Walter's management, but we inject enough capital to satisfy the bank. In return, we get a percentage of future profits." Outrage rippled through the crowd. People muttered about corporate meddling, about losing independence. Alicia's pulse pounded as she watched Walter torn between the community's smaller contributions and Reeves's big money offer. Ruth slammed her palm on the table. "This is a community meeting. You're no part of this." Reeves faced Walter directly. "If your neighbors can't raise enough, my investment might be your only shot at saving the ranch." A strangled hush enveloped the hall. Walter's gaze flicked to the whiteboard with the pledges, then back to Reeves. Alicia could practically see the war raging in his mind. A partial sale might keep the ranch afloat, but at the cost of inviting these vultures onto his land. Clay stepped forward. "Don't do it, Walter. Once he's got a foot in the door, he'll own you." Walter's shoulders heaved with the weight of the decision. Alicia squeezed his hand, silently conveying her faith in him. But she knew he felt the crushing pressure of the bank's deadline and the fear of letting everyone down. Finally, Walter spoke, voice trembling with emotion. "I appreciate everyone's generosity. You've shown more kindness than I ever expected. But we're still short, and time is running out." A wave of dread swept through the room. Ruth glared daggers at Reeves, as if her stare could banish him on the spot. Reeves took a step closer to Walter. "This is business, not personal. We can finalize an agreement within a day." Walter locked eyes with Alicia. She felt the heartbreak in his gaze, the sense that he might sacrifice part of his dream to save the rest. Her heart slammed against her ribcage. "Walter," she whispered, "please don't give up everything." His voice cracked. "I don't know what else to do." Emotion flared in Alicia's chest. Before she could respond, Gary let out a sharp whistle. "Wait, let's not rush. We still have 2 days," Walter interrupted bleakly. 2 days until the bank forecloses." The crowd murmured anxiously, some urging Walter to stand firm, others suggesting compromise. In that swirl of voices, Alicia saw him crumble, shoulders sagging as he faced the possibility that his father's legacy might slip through his fingers. This was their collective dark night of the soul, a moment when every path forward looked bleak. At last, Walter turned to Reeves. "Show me the paperwork," he said, resigned. "I need to know exactly what percentage you'd take." Alicia's heart lurched. This felt like betrayal, even though she understood his desperation. The hush in the room was deafening. Reeves nodded smoothly, offering a sympathetic smile. "We'll talk first thing tomorrow morning." With that, the meeting disbanded, ranchers leaving in tense silence. Alicia stood close to Walter, her mind spinning. He looked utterly defeated, trapped in a nightmare. She looped her arm through his, wanting to anchor him, but uncertain how to pull him back from the brink. They stepped outside under a moonless sky. Walter stared at the stars, eyes hollow. "I swore I'd never let outsiders take a piece of this place," he whispered, "but I can't see another way." Tears threatened to spill from Alicia's eyes as she leaned her forehead against his shoulder. "We'll figure something out," she said, though fear twisted in her gut. And in the stillness of that dark night, with the ranch's future teetering on a razor's edge, they stood entwined, two souls fighting a battle that might cost them everything. Walter Cooper hardly slept after the tense meeting at the community hall. By the time dawn's first light crept through his bedroom window, he was already fully dressed, pacing across worn floorboards. His mind replayed every conversation from the night before. The neighbors' heartfelt pledges, Daniel Reeves's slick proposal for a partial stake in the ranch, and Alicia's whispered words of encouragement despite her own rising fears. Downstairs, he found Alicia seated at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee between her hands, barely touched. She looked up as he entered, concern etched in her features. "Couldn't sleep, huh?" she asked softly. He shook his head, sinking onto the chair across from her. "I'm meeting Reeves this morning, just to hear the details of his so-called investment deal." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "It goes against everything I ever wanted, but I don't see another choice." Alicia reached across the table, resting her palm on his. "You're doing what you must to save this place. It doesn't define you." Before Walter could respond, Gary appeared in the doorway. "Morning, boss. I got the truck ready for you. Want me to come along?" Walter considered this. Part of him wanted Gary's backup, but the other part felt he should face Reeves alone. "No, it's better if I go by myself," he decided. "You stay here, keep things running. We've still got chores and that foaling stall to finish preparing for Rosie." Gary grimaced, but nodded. Alicia stood, grabbing her jacket. "I'll ride with you, at least, if that's okay." Walter hesitated. On one hand, he worried about subjecting her to more of Reeves's manipulations. On the other, her steady presence might remind him of what truly mattered. Finally, he relented with a curt nod. "All right." They drove in near silence, the truck rumbling along a back road that led toward the small real estate office Reeves was using as a temporary base. Alicia occasionally cast side glances at Walter's tense profile, wishing she could ease the storm inside him. She thought back to their darkest moment last night, when he'd looked ready to surrender everything. Yet, here he was, pushing forward. In town, they parked outside a modest brick building. A sign reading "Midwest Land and Properties" hung above the entrance. Alicia's stomach flipped. Walter gave her a lingering look. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly. She swallowed her nerves. "I'm sure." Inside, Reeves greeted them with that practiced smile. He wore a tailored suit and extended a handshake that Walter barely acknowledged. The small reception area smelled of stale coffee. A secretary ushered them into a cramped conference room where a contract lay open on a polished table. "I appreciate you coming," Reeves began, smoothing the lapel of his jacket. "Let's get straight to it. Our firm invests in agricultural properties. We supply the capital you need to settle your debt and meet the bank's demands. In return, we receive a 30% ownership stake. You remain the primary owner, manager, and figurehead." Walter took a seat, glaring at the printed pages. Alicia perched beside him, scanning the lines from over his shoulder. Reeves tapped the top of the contract. "You'll find the terms generous. We won't interfere with daily operations unless profitability falls below an agreed threshold. Then we have certain rights to step in and suggest changes." Walter's jaw tightened. "And if I sign this, the ranch is no longer fully mine." Reeves spread his hands. "Technically, yes, but it's better than losing everything in a foreclosure. And we can close this deal within 24 hours, well before your bank deadline." A heavy silence followed. Alicia felt Walter's inner turmoil radiating like heat. She squeezed his arm in silent support. "Mind if we talk privately for a moment?" she asked, voice taut. Reeves gestured magnanimously. "Of course, take your time. I'll step out." He left them in the small room, the contract looming like a necessary evil. Alicia leaned in, speaking in hushed tones. "Walter, I know this feels like betrayal, but it might be the only way to keep the ranch alive." He rubbed a hand over his face, eyes filled with anguish. "My father worked himself into an early grave building that place up from nothing. I promised I'd never let outsiders control it. Now, I'm on the verge of signing away nearly a third." Alicia bit her lip, recalling the neighbor's pledges. "We have to weigh one heartbreak against a worse one, losing the ranch entirely. Maybe, over time, you can buy back Reeves's share." Walter closed his eyes. The clock was ticking, the bank's ultimatum echoing in his mind. "All right," he whispered at last, "but I want to see if there's any wiggle room, less than 30%, lower interest, something." He called Reeves back in and began a tense negotiation. Reeves listened politely, but his counters were firm. The stake had to be at least 25%. The capital infusion had to cover the outstanding loan and future improvements, and Reeves insisted on a seat at the table for major financial decisions. Even so, the possibility of slightly better terms flickered, like a glimmer of light in a long tunnel. Alicia watched Walter battle for each fraction of a percent, each condition, refusing to roll over completely. By the time they reached a tentative agreement, both men looked drained. Reeves promised to revise the contract and forward it to the ranch for final review within hours. Walter stood, shoulders slumped. Alicia slipped her hand into his. "You did what you had to do," she whispered. He nodded, eyes distant. "I just hope I can live with it." They left the building and stood by the truck under a wide sky. Clouds drifted overhead, a reminder of the unsettled future. Alicia touched Walter's arm, scanning his face. "You're saving the ranch," she said gently. "That's something." His gaze flicked to her with a weary half-smile. "Maybe, but it's also a sign I failed in my promise to keep it fully ours. I guess I never wanted to admit I might need help." Alicia's heart squeezed with empathy. "Needing help isn't failure, Walter. It's human." He pressed his lips together, eyes shining with unspoken gratitude. Then he helped her into the truck, and they rumbled away from the office, the contract's ghost trailing behind them. As they passed farmland and distant silos, Alicia caught herself imagining what might come next: a partial corporate stake, lingering tension, yet also the ranch still standing, fields still growing, animals still thriving. Perhaps in that uncertain road ahead, she and Walter could find a way to nurture their own bond, too. While the horizon remained cloudy, one thing felt clearer than ever. This was the final stretch of their harrowing journey. They had broken through the darkest night, forging a tenuous path forward, and though the price was high, so was the promise that they might yet save the home Walter cherished and the love they had just begun to claim as their own. Walter and Alicia arrived back at the ranch to find a flurry of commotion outside the main house. Trucks and cars lined the dirt driveway, and a small crowd had gathered near the porch. Gary jogged over, waving his arms. "What's going on?" Walter asked, stepping out of the truck. Gary's expression was equal parts exasperation and delight. "You're not going to believe this, boss. Folks from all over the county showed up today. They brought supplies, offered labor, and some even chipped in more money." Walter's jaw dropped. He glanced at Alicia, who beamed. "We just had a community meeting," Gary explained. "Word traveled fast that you might be forced to sign with Reeves, and now everyone wants to pitch in, see if we can tip the scales enough to beat his offer." Emotion welled in Walter's chest. He hadn't expected such a rally, especially after last night's shortfall. He climbed the porch steps to greet the assembled neighbors. Ruth was there, Clay and his wife, the Watkins couple, and even people Walter barely knew. Ruth stepped forward, clipboard in hand. We did more calling, more rummaging through our accounts, even took a quick collection in town. It's not a fortune, but it's another chunk of cash we can pour into your bank escrow. Might make that corporate deal unnecessary. Alicia watched Walter's face, seeing hope flicker in his eyes. I don't know how to thank you, he managed, voice thick. You thank us, Ruth said firmly, by keeping this ranch running and remembering who your friends are. Walter swallowed hard, scanning the sea of faces. For a moment, the weight on his shoulders lightened. He couldn't believe the outpouring of support. Yet, his mind replayed Reeves's soon-to-arrive contract, the bank's deadline, and the possibility that even this might not be enough. He gathered himself. Listen, he began, raising his voice to address the crowd. You've all done more than I ever imagined. This ranch, it isn't just mine anymore. It's part of all of you. No matter what happens with the bank, I promise I'll pay back every cent, or you'll all have a share in this place. A wave of murmured agreement passed through the group. Some nodded, others dabbed tears. Alicia felt her heart glow at the display of unity. Maybe, just maybe, they had a fighting chance. As people dispersed to unload trucks of feed and construction materials, Alicia spotted a familiar figure near the barn. Carmen. She wore dusty sneakers and had her arms crossed, surveying the ranch with wide-eyed wonder. What are you doing here? Alicia exclaimed, rushing over. She nearly tackled her friend in a hug. Carmen let out a breathless laugh. After that last call, I couldn't just sit in the city. I quit my temp job and hopped on a bus. I want to help, even if all I can do is cheer you on or pitch in with some grunt work. Alicia blinked back tears, overwhelmed by Carmen's loyalty. You're amazing, but I hate that you quit your job for this. Carmen shrugged. I needed a change anyway, and I'm dying to meet the infamous Walter. Flushing, Alicia glanced around until she spotted Walter talking with Gary about the new contributions. He's been through a lot. We all have. But come on! She guided Carmen over, and Walter paused his conversation, giving Carmen a polite nod. He looked a bit sheepish under her assessing gaze. So, you're the reason Alicia's glowing these days, Carmen teased, hands on her hips. Nice to finally meet you. Walter, slightly flustered, extended a hand. Thanks for coming all this way. We need all the help we can get. Carmen shook his hand briskly. I'm not exactly a farm girl, but I can fold laundry and feed chickens. Where do you want me? Gary snorted. We'll start you with the chickens. They're friendly, mostly. The group shared a quick laugh, a bright note amid the tension. Alicia felt gratitude surging through her again. It was as if the ranch itself was radiating energy, people drawn here by a shared sense of purpose. All afternoon, everyone toiled like a well-oiled machine. Some repaired fences, while others sorted supplies. Carmen proved surprisingly adept with a hammer, driving nails into loose boards around the chicken coop. Ruth took charge of an impromptu bake sale at the orchard stand, funneling extra cash to the ranch. Gary directed a team in the barn, ensuring everything was spotless in case the bank reps decided to show up unannounced. Alicia spent hours tallying the new donations. Though she wasn't a financial expert, she knew how to handle spreadsheets, and with each additional entry, she felt the total inching closer to what the bank demanded. Walter hovered by her side, scanning the columns of figures with cautious optimism. By nightfall, they collapsed around a bonfire that Marco and Clay had set up. Families roasted hot dogs, children chased each other under the stars, and exhausted ranch hands swapped stories about storms weathered and triumphs earned. Alicia and Carmen huddled on a hay bale, laughing over their own city girl missteps, like the time Alicia nearly fell off the hayloft, or when Carmen shrieked upon finding a spider in the coop. Walter approached with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. He handed one to Alicia, eyes flicking toward Carmen. Here, I made extra. Carmen winked at Alicia, taking the mug from him. "Thanks, cowboy." Walter cleared his throat, turning back to Alicia. "I crunched the final numbers. We might be only a few thousand short of matching what Reeves's investment would cover, and that's before I see if the accountant can tweak anything else." Alicia's eyes lit up. "That's incredible news. So we might not need him." Walter inhaled slowly, the firelight dancing across his face. "We'll see. He'll email the revised contract tomorrow morning. If we can show the bank we have enough backing without giving up a big stake, I'll take that route in a heartbeat." A burst of hope ignited in Alicia's chest. Leaning closer, she rested her head against his shoulder. Carmen discreetly wandered off, leaving them in a pocket of intimacy. They stayed like that for a while, warmth radiating from the bonfire and the closeness of their bodies. The day's triumphs mingled with underlying tension. Tomorrow would bring Reeves's final offer. Would it still eclipse the community's efforts? Or had they finally rallied enough to stand on their own? Gazing into the flickering flames, Alicia sensed that they were on the cusp of something extraordinary. This was no longer just about finances. It was about a community defying odds, about a quiet man learning he didn't have to stand alone, and about a city woman discovering she wanted to plant her roots on this land for good. As the moon rose higher, they all drifted to their respective beds, carrying an electric mixture of optimism and dread. And though Alicia's exhaustion tugged at her, sleep didn't come easily. Her thoughts danced with possibilities of saving the ranch, forging a future with Walter, and proving that no storm, literal or metaphorical, could uproot the determination and love blossoming in this patch of Nebraska soil. Walter was up before dawn, prowling around the house like a restless cat. He tried sipping coffee, but the bitterness only fueled his anxiety. The revised contract from Daniel Reeves would arrive in his email any minute, and with it, the final puzzle piece in this high-stakes chess match. Alicia found him in the living room, staring at his laptop's blank screen. She approached quietly, setting a fresh cup of coffee on a side table. "Nervous?" she asked, though the answer was obvious. He let out a shaky breath, combing his fingers through his hair. "Like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. One signature either saves the ranch or sells part of it off forever." Alicia squeezed his shoulder. "And if the numbers from yesterday's rally are as good as we hope, maybe you don't have to sign anything." Gary poked his head in. "Boss, I'm making eggs if you want some. Might help settle your stomach." Walter snorted weakly. "Doubt it, but thanks." Just then, a chime sounded. A new email. Tension descended like a sudden chill. Walter sat stiffly, opening his inbox. Alicia hovered over his shoulder, pulse throbbing in her ears. From Daniel Reeves. Subject: Cooper Ranch, revised investment agreement. Walter clicked it. The attached PDF popped open, revealing pages of legalese. Alicia could make out a few bolded lines. 25% stake, capital infusion, phase profit sharing. Walter scrolled to the final page, scanning the key figures. "Looks like he lowered his stake from 30 to 25%, Walter muttered. "He also increased the capital infusion by 5%. Must think I'm desperate." Alicia's heart sank. The deal was better, but still a corporate foothold on the ranch. "Compare it to our community pledges," she suggested. Walter opened a separate spreadsheet, one Alicia had been updating. He cross-referenced the total of local donations, equipment pledges, and small loans offered. His expression darkened. They were still short, several $1,000s short, of matching Reeves's infusion. He exhaled sharply. "Damn it, even with everything, we don't hit the number he's promising. The bank might see that gap and refuse to extend our credit." Alicia felt a physical ache in her chest. They were so close, yet not enough. She fought to keep her voice steady. "Could we patch that difference? Maybe a personal loan from someone else, or..." I don't know. Another fundraiser. Walter rubbed his temples. In 3 days. Seems impossible. The bank wants cold, hard proof right now. Her mind whirled. What if, she began, then paused, swallowing hard. I have some savings back in the city. It's not huge, but I could add it to the pot. Walter snapped his head up. No, absolutely not. You've sacrificed enough. She grabbed his hand. Walter, it's not a fortune, but it could help. You'd pay me back eventually. He stared at her, torn between pride and gratitude. Before he could respond, Carmen appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. You guys aren't the only ones with a little stash. My grandma left me some money a while back. I was saving it for, I don't know, a future dream. Maybe this is the dream. Emotion clogged Alicia's throat. She wanted to protest that Carmen shouldn't throw away her inheritance, but the determined look in her friend's eyes made it clear she was serious. Walter pressed his lips together, wrestling with the implications. I can't ask you both to do that. You're not asking, Alicia insisted. We're offering. This ranch is worth it. A pained gratitude flickered in his gaze. He turned back to the spreadsheet, recalculating with Alicia and Carmen's combined funds. His eyes widened as the new total emerged, still not as high as Reeves's deal, but much, much closer. Could this sway the bank? Alicia asked, voice trembling with cautious hope. Walter rubbed the back of his neck. It might. It shows we can match nearly 90% of what Reeves offers, plus we stay fully independent. The question is, do we gamble on the bank accepting that? Gary, who'd been hovering silently, spoke up. Boss, that might be enough. The bank's main concern is risk. If you show them a big enough infusion, they might back off. Walter's face tensed. For a moment, no one breathed. Then he rose abruptly, grabbing his truck keys from the coffee table. I'll go see them right now. Send them our revised documents. If this is our best shot, we can't wait. Alicia's pulse hammered. I'll come with you. This matters to me, too. He nodded. In minutes, they'd printed the updated spreadsheets and snatched up every relevant paper. Gary and Carmen stood by the door, expressions full of encouragement. Go get 'em, Carmen said, fighting tears. We believe in you. Walter and Alicia raced out to the truck, hearts pounding in unison. As they sped down the dirt driveway, dust clouding behind them, Alicia found his hand and clasped it tight. You can do this, she murmured. Walter exhaled shakily, eyes fixed on the road. For the first time in my life, I'm not facing a crisis alone. Let's hope it's enough. They reached the bank just as it opened. The same manager who'd met Walter earlier eyed Alicia curiously as they entered. Walter laid out the new plan, voice quavering with intensity. He explained the community pledges, the personal contributions, the final tally that all but closed the gap. The manager frowned, sifting through the documents. This is unexpected. You've nearly matched the corporate offer. Walter nodded, jaw tight. Yes, and we want to keep the ranch independent. This should prove we can cover the loan's collateral shortfall. A tense hush followed. The manager flipped through pages, running a finger down columns of numbers. Finally, he looked up. I'll need to discuss this with our underwriters. Wait here. He disappeared into a back room, leaving Walter and Alicia in a silent office corridor. Alicia's chest felt tight enough to burst. If the bank declined, the Reeves deal might become unavoidable. Minutes ticked by like hours until the manager returned. His expression was neutral, impossible to read. So, he said slowly, it looks like we may have a viable arrangement under certain conditions. Walter's heart pounded so fiercely he could hardly hear the bank manager's next words. Alicia clutched his hand, her own pulse racing in her ears. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. The manager set the papers on his desk, meeting Walter's gaze. Our underwriters will allow you to retain your existing line of credit and extend a restructured payment plan, provided that these community pledges and private contributions are legally documented. We'll need to see signed statements confirming these amounts will be available as liquidity within the month. Relief crashed over Alicia like a wave. She barely resisted the urge to hug Walter right there. He swallowed, nodding. We can provide that. Absolutely, the manager offered a tight smile. Then we have an agreement in principle. We'll finalize details within the next 2 days. I trust you'll keep us informed if anything changes. Walter exhaled a shaky breath. Thank you. We will. As they left the bank, Alicia clung to his arm, tears of joy threatening to spill. You did it, she whispered. We did it. A faint grin tugged at Walter's lips. We're not out of the woods yet. We need to collect formal pledges from everyone, but yeah, this is huge. If we secure all the funds, we won't need to sell any stake to Reeves. She let out a giddy laugh. I can't wait to tell everyone. They hurried back to the ranch, the midday sun shining like a blessing on the rolling fields. The moment their truck pulled up, Gary, Carmen, and the others rushed over. Walter spilled the good news, voice trembling with excitement. The bank agreed to restructure our loan as long as we get official pledges in writing. Cheers erupted. Gary whooped, pumping his fist in the air. Carmen threw her arms around Alicia, squealing with delight. Marco grinned so wide it looked like his face might split. We still need to finalize it, Walter cautioned, but it means we can hold off Reeves. A collective sense of triumph electrified the ranch. Word spread fast. Neighbors who'd pitched in rushed over to sign quick statements, affirming their pledges. Ruth organized a makeshift notary system in town, stamping the documents so the bank would see everything was official. Alicia, phone in hand, helped coordinate the flurry of signings. She felt a swirl of pride and gratitude. This was the true power of community. One by one, signatures appeared on pages, until they had a thick sheaf of proof that the ranch was viable without corporate intervention. That evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, another vehicle rolled into the driveway. Daniel Reeves stepped out, wearing his usual tailored suit and a puzzled frown. Spotting Walter, Alicia, and Gary by the porch, he approached. I heard rumors you're no longer interested in our deal, Reeves said bluntly. That can't be right, not after all the trouble you're in. Walter folded his arms, squaring his shoulders. We've got a new arrangement with the bank. Your partial stake offer won't be necessary. Reeves blinked, scanning the yard. The crowd of neighbors behind Walter, plus the stack of signed pledges in Alicia's arms, told the story. You're turning down a guaranteed windfall for the sake of random donations. Gary bristled. They're not random donations, buddy. They're from our friends, neighbors, and local businesses. We're standing on our own. Reeves pressed his lips together, his composure slipping. This is a foolish decision. The bank could still renegotiate or withdraw. You're gambling with your legacy. Walter lifted his chin, eyes unwavering. I'm betting on my community, and we're not for sale. An awkward hush followed. Alicia stepped closer to Walter, her presence a gentle anchor. Reeves glanced at her, then at the stack of papers. His jaw clenched as he realized they were truly shutting him out. I hope you don't regret this, he said quietly. My offer was genuine. Walter's voice remained calm. I appreciate it, but we're done here, unless you plan to buy some eggs or fresh produce on your way out. A rustle of amused laughter rippled through the gathered ranch hands. Reeves's face darkened. Without another word, he turned on his heel and marched back to his luxury SUV, the engine revving as he drove off in a cloud of dust. As soon as Reeves was gone, a collective cheer went up. The tension that had hovered for weeks cracked, giving way to an almost giddy sense of victory. Ruth high-fived Gary, while Marco tipped his hat in mock salute. Alicia stepped back, observing Walter in the middle of it all. The man who'd once carried every burden alone, now surrounded by loyal friends and neighbors. She couldn't help the tears that welled in her eyes. Walter caught sight of her, excused himself from the crowd, and strode over. "You all right?" She laughed through her tears. "Yes, it's just—" "Everything is finally coming together." He slipped an arm around her waist, steering her away from the clamor toward a quiet patch of yard beneath a tall oak. The last traces of daylight glowed around them, giving the moment a soft, golden hue. "You were ready to invest your own savings," he said, voice low. "I don't know how to thank you for that kind of faith." Alicia rested a hand against his chest. "This ranch is special, Walter. You're special. If you need proof of that, just look at how everyone rallied." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I've never been good at leaning on others, but you showed me it's okay to ask for help, and that maybe there's more to life than just defending what's mine." Her heart fluttered. "Yeah, there's a whole world out there, like two people figuring out how to be together." Walter's gaze turned tender. "I want that with you, Alicia. More than I ever expected. Do you still want to stay?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes. I'd like to figure out a way to make this my home. If you'll have me." An unguarded smile spread across Walter's face, the kind that melted every hard line of worry and pride. He leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips. The cheers from across the yard faded into the background, replaced by the steady drum of her heartbeat. When they pulled apart, Alicia could barely breathe, happiness coiling inside her like an ember that refused to die. Above them, the sky flared with streaks of purple and pink, as if nature itself was celebrating. The ranch still faced challenges, paperwork to finalize, a shaky financial footing to shore up. But the nightmare of corporate takeover had passed. And, more importantly, Walter stood arm in arm with the woman who had changed his life in ways he never saw coming. They turned back toward the porch, hands linked, and in the final glow of dusk, Alicia felt certain that no matter what storms might arise, they would face them side by side, stronger, braver, and hopeful for the future they were building together. A month after the showdown with Daniel Reeves, Cooper Ranch bustled under a bright morning sun. The bank paperwork was officially signed, the restructured loan secured, and the community's pledges fully documented. The ranch's finances remained tight, but the looming specter of foreclosure had receded like a dissipating storm cloud. Standing on the porch, Alicia breathed in the crisp air, a mug of coffee warming her hands. She'd moved most of her belongings from the city. Carmen had stayed on temporarily, helping where she could and discovering she actually liked goats more than she ever imagined. They planned to revisit their living situation soon, but for now, Alicia was content to have her friend close. In the distance, she saw Walter in his usual place, walking the fence line. Except this time, he wasn't alone. The neighbor's border collie trotted alongside him, tail wagging. She smiled at the sight. Walter had never been one for pets, but that dog seemed determined to adopt him. She heard a soft nicker from the stable. Rosie. Setting down her mug, Alicia headed across the yard to check on the pregnant mare. The foaling stall was prepped weeks ago, but the mare still hadn't delivered. She seemed content enough, munching hay in a corner. Alicia gently stroked Rosie's flank. "Any day now, huh, girl?" she murmured. Rosie flicked an ear as if acknowledging the conversation. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned to find Walter at the stable entrance, the border collie sniffing around his boots. "Morning," he said, voice warm. "Morning," Alicia replied, stepping aside so he could examine Rosie. The routine had become an unspoken dance. Check her breathing, examine her belly, note any signs of labor. So far, all calm. She's doing fine, Walter concluded. Then his gaze slid to Alicia with a hint of mischief. You, on the other hand, look tired. Didn't sleep well, Alicia chuckled. Blame the roosters, or maybe the 100 ideas swirling in my head about what to plant next season. Gary insists we try a new organic vegetable line. I'm actually excited. Walter's lips curved into a slow grin. He's been trying to push organic expansion for years. I always said no because it felt like more risk. But now, he shrugged. I'm starting to think risk isn't so bad when you've got a good team. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers. And a good reason. He leaned in, pressing a feather-light kiss to her forehead. Absolutely. Just then, Gary shouted from outside, "Boss, Alicia, we've got visitors." Walter and Alicia exchanged a glance, then headed out of the stable. A small group approached on foot, neighbors, some from miles away, led by Ruth. She waved a piece of paper in the air. "Walter, Alicia," she called out. "County Fair Committee came through. They're inviting Cooper Ranch to showcase produce at the event next week. Free booth, prime location." Walter's eyebrows shot up. "Us? Really?" Ruth grinned. "Why not? We're known now for pulling together after the storms. The fair wants that story. They even said you could bring Rosie if she's foaled by then. Folks love seeing a newborn colt or filly." Alicia felt a thrill of excitement. She glanced at Walter. "That's incredible. We could show the new direction for the ranch, the organic line, the orchard produce, everything." Walter still looked stunned. Sure, that could be good for business." "Of course it will," Ruth chided. "Now, are you in or not?" Walter exchanged a conspiratorial smile with Alicia. "We're in," he declared. "Let's show the county what Cooper Ranch can do." Cheering erupted among the neighbors, who soon fanned out to chat about booth decorations, possible produce displays, and promotional flyers. Alicia found herself caught in the swirl of excitement, amazement coursing through her veins. Not only was the ranch safe, but it was evolving, opening doors to new possibilities. A week later, under a brilliant summer sky, the county fair bustled with color and laughter. Families strolled past carnival rides and cotton candy stands. Livestock exhibits displayed prize hogs, gleaming horses, and contented cows. But the real buzz was around the Cooper Ranch Revival booth, a rustic stand decorated with bales of hay, fresh vegetables, homemade jams, and framed photos of the ranch's journey. Behind the booth, Alicia and Gary handed out samples of roasted corn and apple slices from the orchard. Kids squealed with delight, and curious passers-by asked about farming methods, enthralled by the story of how a community came together to save a threatened ranch. Walter hovered nearby, occasionally speaking with folks who recognized him. Though still not entirely comfortable with the spotlight, he greeted well-wishers, his pride in the ranch clear. Carmen flitted around taking photos and live-streaming the event to a small social media following she'd built, jokingly called City Girls on a Farm. Suddenly, Alicia felt a tug on her sleeve. She turned to find Walter, eyes dancing. "Alicia, you better come with me." He led her through the fairgrounds to a quieter patch of grass near a cluster of oak trees. The roar of the crowd fell away, leaving only the distant hum of carnival music. Her heart pounded with curiosity. Walter took her hands. "I've been thinking about how this last month has changed my life, changed our lives. I didn't see any of it coming. You, the storms, the bet, the community's response. But I'm grateful for every twist and turn." She swallowed a sudden lump in her throat. "Me too. I told you once that I'm not good at sharing how I feel." He paused, eyes bright with meaning. "But I've never been clearer about this. I want a future with you here. Building this ranch the way we envision it, starting something that lasts." Alicia's breath caught, her lips curving in a tremulous smile. "Walter, yes, I want that." He let out a relieved chuckle, pulling her into a warm embrace. Good, because I'm all in. They stayed locked together for a moment, the fair's noise distant, as though the world had shrunk to just the two of them. Eventually, they drew apart, hands still clasped. "It's crazy," Alicia whispered, "how a bet brought us together, and now everything's changed." Walter brushed his thumb across her cheek. "It's more than a bet, it's a life we're choosing, together." He leaned in, capturing her lips in a tender kiss. This time, there was no trace of hesitation or fear. It felt like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place, the promise of a new chapter they'd write side by side. Back at the booth, a small crowd gathered, intrigued by the new produce. A cheerful sign read, "Cooper Ranch, stronger than any storm." And from the corner, Carmen snapped a photo of Walter and Alicia returning, hands entwined, glowing with quiet joy. Later that day, Rosie's foal was paraded around the fair, a tiny, wobbly-legged colt that garnered coos and applause. Alicia and Walter stood by, proud as new parents, as though the ranch itself had birthed fresh hope along with new life. With the sun dipping low behind the Ferris wheel, casting a golden haze over the fairgrounds, Alicia surveyed the scene. A once-threatened ranch standing tall, a community that refused to let one of its own fail, and a man whose heart had finally opened to let her in. This was her home now, an ever-changing landscape of sweat, laughter, and resilience. And in that final image, a bright summer fair, neighbors celebrating, a colt prancing in new straw, Alicia saw the culmination of every risk they'd taken. Walter's bet had been won in ways neither of them ever expected. The city girl had not only adapted to ranch life, she'd discovered love, purpose, and a forever place in his fiercely guarded heart. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.